Welcome to the Intercut podcast, the podcast going over the latest in TV, movies, and entertainment that people just can't cut away from. I am your co-host Zachary Shevich, and joining me with a Fahrenheit coffee in hand, walking down King
Ooh,
Street, it's Arturo Zurita.
I should have had more of those. This episode is brought to you by all the double doubles that we had over at Toronto, watching back to back movies on another fantastic TIFF festival. You had been
Yeah.
back last year. It's been a minute since I went over the border
Mm-hmm.
that way, and honestly, it was a blast. There was a lot of really great movies that came out. It was cool being able to chill after like 10 hours of sitting down to hang out to then go back to wake up and do it all over again. But Toronto was a fantastic experience. It continues to be the festival that I think both of us say is the best bang for your buck. It's like such an easy festival, especially now more than ever with how contained they've had it. And I think both you and I would agree that even though it was very different this year, a lot of things were missing. It was a blast.
Yeah, I mean, I always have a great time in Toronto. It's a really fun place to have a film festival, and yeah, we run into lots of fun, lots of people there that we like. Shout out to Tyler and Shane and Max, who said hi this year. Some intercuties who
are good people.
Make Toronto feel like a second home for us. I mean, it's a great festival because there are so many movies, and they're happening in so often that like you can hear about a movie and then still find time to fit it into your schedule, which is not something that every film festival allows. A lot of film festivals have just like one or two screenings of things, so it's a fun festival in terms of like your ability to shift and follow the buzz and catch things that maybe weren't on your radar 2 days ago, but now you know that movie got great reviews and you got to see it before you leave town. And it's always a festival that introduces a lot of the upcoming movies that are worth paying attention to as we head into the fall and winter months. This is the start of the fall film festival season, and which a lot of people think coincides with basically the start of award season, as a lot of the movies that are vying for potential Oscars or other awards in the future get released at these festivals. But it's also a preview of just some upcoming exciting horror movies and exciting comedy movies and thrillers and all sorts of interesting foreign films and documentaries. We love going to these festivals partially because it gives us a head start on the movies that we'll be talking about over the next year. Even Sanctuary, movie that I saw at TIFF last year, is out on Hulu now. But yeah, I mean, this year definitely was a bit different than in some years past, as you alluded to. We are obviously in the midst of the writer's strike and the actors' strike. So what is ordinarily a very glamour-filled, glitzy event with red carpets full of celebrities and Q&As featuring renowned actors talking about their roles was a lot less so. There was still some of that. Some movies, particularly the ones from A24 and Neon, got waivers in order to have their stars attend. But I think the talk sort of the festival was that there was maybe like an absence of some of the films we would expect, or some of the glamour we would expect, which isn't the reason we go there. We go there to discover stuff, and there is still a lot of stuff worth discovering. If you have to compare it to previous festivals, though, I feel like it's fair to say that it is maybe a slightly weaker crop, as much as there are great things worth talking about at this year's Toronto Film Festival.
Yeah, I think it's still very solid. I can only compare it to like the year Parasite and Portrait came out, and like I don't think that's fair. That's just like an abnormal year.
Waves.
Uncut Gems. No, I don't think it's fair to compare it to that year, because that year was like an abnormal year in terms of like high quality. Pedro had a movie there, Almodovar, with Pain and Gain. So it's like we can keep naming ones from 2019 that are fantastic, but I think this one was pretty. Pain and Glory? Pain and Glory, you're correct. But here, you still had a lot of really good movies. I think you and I also dealt with this festival a little bit differently because I have Chicago and
Yeah,
you had New
New
York
York.
coming up. And
Hmm.
because we both have those and the full lineups are up, I highly recommend. Both lineups are incredible. We took a lot of movies out there that I know you're going to run through that would have been really big contenders. Like some of the top rated ones you and I are saving because we're going to see them at another festival. And so we
Absolutely.
took the time to see movies that are not going to be showing at those fests. So I think it's really indicative of like what you've seen. You know, some people come out and be like, this wasn't really strong. 10 movies out of 90. Well, yeah.
Right.
I mean, it just depends on what you end up choosing. And if they end up being disappointments, it really all falls down to what you curate for yourself. I thought it was a fantastic festival. Like you said, we don't go primarily for the red carpets and such, but it does add to the festival when you get to hear the talent speak about the movie. We
Yeah.
still had a lot of directors, not as many writers. Some writers who
Hmm.
they snuck their way in there. I don't know if they should have been there.
They're also
Um, they're
producers.
also producers, so I'm going to talk about how I produced my writing. But hey, I don't know how all that stuff works. Very confusing to me. We've talked
Yeah.
about that in the past, but I will say one of the big things for this year, and it's going to be one of the first categories that we break down, is that we love award season. We know some people make the whole movie just awards and they can't
Yeah.
think out of what the story is. You and I are in that middle ground where we understand that award season coincides with some of the best movies because producers and studios are timing it to that. So it's
Hmm.
like, I don't want to live by the Roman calendar. You ain't got no choice. Everybody runs by
Right.
the same thing. So we
Yeah.
know that the best of the best is going to come out during this time. So
Exactly.
that's why we love fall season for that reason.
And I think the people who are kind of cynical about awards season overlook that just because the awards or the Oscars don't necessarily award what you think is best, doesn't
Yeah,
necessarily mean that this isn't the season when the best stuff is
for
coming
sure.
out, right? Like this is the time
Yeah,
when we
it
can
just there's a
latch
release
onto a
date.
movie and be like, oh, they should have nominated that one.
Yeah,
But
and
like
even
exactly like you're saying, like this is the season for the best movies, I think.
yeah, fall is just better for baseball. I'm sorry to say,
Yep.
it
Yep.
just is. But we got a bunch of them. Some of the stuff that won't get nominated, but nonetheless, we are here to put some of the best that we have seen in your radar, whether it gets awards or not. We are here for the movies, and hopefully, we have a future must watch for you.
Absolutely. We have a lot of movies to get through on this recap. And why don't we start it off, like you're saying, with some of the movies that potentially could be in the awards discussion down the line. And one of the things that TIFF is known for is their People's Choice winner. Audiences get to vote on every movie that plays the fest, regardless of whether or not it's a world premiere or a movie that's been at a couple other festivals. And
Question for you:
yes.
did you vote once?
No, I don't know if I've ever voted for a film festival's People's Choice vote if it was online. I love when they give you the little thing.
The
They used to
little thing,
yeah, they used to give you a little piece of paper where you could
paper,
rip off
cut it out,
whatever. Yeah,
you
and that
put
was
it in
fun
there.
and tactile, but I guess that
Yeah.
it's killing too many trees or it requires too many volunteers to count them all. Now you got to digitize it. I get it, but I don't vote on People's Choice ever. So
Yeah.
maybe
By the
that
time the
is a
mail-in ballot gets in
self-selecting
there,
crowd, right?
it could be, yeah, because I think you're missing a lot of people who don't go and vote for it at the end of it. Whereas,
Yeah.
like you said, you give them a little piece of paper, they're voting right then and there. Even Chicago critics switched over to an Xfinity
Mm.
like website to vote. I don't know, but it was interesting for this winner.
Yeah, the TIFF People's Choice Award winner has a kind of fame or maybe infamy because it so often coincides with some type of Academy Award honors, whether that is just a Best Picture nomination or even a win. In fact, it's been like several years in a
Yeah,
row that films like The Imitation Game and Room and La La Land and Three Billboards and Green Book and Jojo Rabbit and
it keeps going.
Nomadland and Belfast and Fablemans all picked up the People's Choice win and went on to get an Oscar nomination, if not win, for Best Picture.
Or
So,
another award, yeah.
yeah. So this year, quite intriguingly, went to American Fiction, which is one of the films I think we both spotlighted prior to the festival as one that we are very excited for. The directorial debut of Cord Jefferson, starring Jeffrey Wright, an actor I really love, and it was really excited to see in a starring role, in a role that some people are talking about as a film that could potentially net him an Oscar nomination. I don't know if it's necessarily like a splashy enough role that he's going to become a front runner, but these People's Choice Award, the People's Choice Award winner does have this correlation with the Oscars. So First of all, let's talk about the movie, because I think American Fiction is one of my favorite films that I saw in Toronto. As we mentioned, from Cord Jefferson, it's his adaptation of the book Erasure, which is about
Mm.
a uh, a, a professor and a writer whose work isn't deemed black enough, who decides to write a novel sort of to pander to what he believes audiences like, and it starts to get out of his hands. It's a really interesting satire of creativity and the publishing industry and what audiences ask for as well. Art, I know this is one of your favorites as well. What was really interesting about American Fiction to you?
All the performances, the way that they set up a lot of the script. To me, this is one that the one award it's going to get, in my opinion, that I think it has a lock in for it, is screenplay. You're telling me it's an adaptation? Barbie's also going for original. I felt that this pretty much leaned more on the original side of things, but
Mhm.
depends how they're going to play it with whoever ends up releasing it. To me, the screenplay is the strongest part of it because there are moments where a lot of the jokes get over delivered. But I think the depth of what it's about is what got a lot of people in our audiences to laugh alongside with it. I think the performances are really good. I
Yeah.
saw people talking about Jeffrey Wright having like the best performance out there of his career. Y'all haven't seen enough Jeffrey Wright. Compliments to the man. He's always going to come in. And this is your first. It's your first. I wouldn't say it's his best. By default, it's his best of the year because he only had a small role in the Wes Anderson movie. I
Yeah.
think everyone involved does a really great job with it, but I think it's the inversion of a lot of things that we've known from prior movies. There's a lot that I love about this movie that I feel has been art here on Intercut and LME all the way back to A to Z talking about these things,
Yeah.
and seeing it in a movie made me like, yes, this is like just the basicness of what we've been talking about with how you break down media. It's like a movie about race while also making fun of the idea that it's about race and that's the only thing it can be
Yeah.
about. And the only worry that I'll give to this is that there are check marks in media where you get to movies that are now making fun of tropes such as the black people dying in a movie first. And the moment you cover that, it feels like you've progressed this far, only to then be like, okay, now we can do away with that. What is the next thing we are now hiding? So
Mhm.
I am ecstatic for American Fiction. But as he was giving the Q&A at the premiere that we had the privilege of being at, he then talked about kind of how what it took to make this movie was so many no's until it was acceptable for producers to make it. So it feels like a win, yet at the same time it feels like, okay, now it's acceptable for this movie to be made. So what is the next? Is this the next cliche? To a degree, is
I
my
mean,
cynical way of looking at it.
yeah, sure. If you want to be cynical about it, sure. But like, it is also very funny, considering that this is the
Sure.
same Toronto audience that a couple years ago gave Green Book the People's Choice Award, giving this one People's Choice Award. I don't know if that says more about the movie or like how audiences maybe have grown in their estimations. But it's kind of making fun of the same people who would give a movie like Green Book the People's Choice Award. So
That's my irony.
yeah, yeah, and I mean, he's steering into the skid there, I guess, if you want to say. Like, it feels a little bit like it's trying to simultaneously entertain and poke fun at its audience. And I don't know, I like films that like do stuff like that. I'm sure it's going to launch a lot of really interesting think pieces, but
Oh,
you know,
you're not annoyed by those think pieces already?
oh yeah, I'm definitely annoyed by
And
that.
that's my
Uh,
point. It's like I love it. It's like you say a joke, but you're just a little upset that while someone found it funny, they finding it funny for the wrong reasons.
yeah, I mean, I'm still just, there's so much in it that I thought was really like cutting and sardonically funny in a way that films so rarely are to me, just like touching a true thing in culture that a lot of people don't want to touch.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated to get into more conversations with people about this movie once they have the chance to see it. But I highly really recommend it. I think to me, like, Bottoms is my funniest movie of the year, but my laughs in this movie like fell to the deepest, if that made sense.
Easily.
Like it hits something inside you, and it's like, oh wow, that is a very hilarious observation, or whatever. And yeah, the performances too. I mean, it helps to have a cast as deep as this one, beyond Jeffrey Wright. Sterling K. Brown, Tracy Ellis Ross. I really like John Ortiz, who showed up in a couple TIFF movies this year.
Yes, he
He's
did.
he's really fun as his agent in this movie.
All my grievances to the side. The way, like you were saying, that it talks about not just the subject, but how we react to the subject. The
Yes.
opening of this movie gets you on board with what it's going to be about, that people who are offended for you are more so doing that for themselves than any other thing. And I love the conversations that it's having. What leads you to think a certain way because of whatever virtue signaling or what you think something should be about, not realizing that in trying to fix a problem, you're almost perpetuating that problem.
Right.
I find the awkwardness of that humor beautiful. And that's why I love a lot about this movie. I don't know if your audience had that, because I think you were in the P&I.
Yeah, I was in the PI.
It's one of those movies that split between like cultural jokes and then what would be the business, because he is a writer. So
Yeah.
there were jokes that you can tell who was press in our screening or who works in the industry when they were talking about how nobody reads anything. There were certain points when they mentioned that there was no more budgets for editors. All of those jokes hit. And then for half of my audience, the other jokes when they were playing montages to other movies, they had no idea what was up on screen. They didn't know the difference between his parody and then what was the movie they were playing? When they were playing like the montage for the fake
Yeah.
BT network, but they were playing Get Rich or Die Trying, and nobody knew that that was a real movie.
Right.
So I'm curious to see how this plays, because I think this has a Thanksgiving release, to see what people gravitate towards the most, or if there's like a mix of it between the culture that he's coming from as a writer and being in the business, and then what it's like to just talk about the media that gets consumed out there.
Totally. I know some people weren't as taken with the whole like familial melodrama that is kind of intertwined. I personally, I think
And
it
that's
is
what's
something
crazy to
that
me.
that
That's the
kind of
core.
anchors the movie. Yeah, to
Thank
me,
you. That's
I
the whole
really
pitch
like
of the
that too.
movie.
Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe we're going to be the outliers on that one, but that all worked for me too. I like
But
this
what I'm
quite
saying
a
is that
bit.
that's what makes you miss the movie, though. It's
Yeah, yeah.
American fiction, because what you think a black person's story should be is what he's making fun of. And in
Hmm.
that story that he's creating to sell, he is telling you, no, those same issues that happen in that cliche thing that you always want to see people in, he's doing it the same way. He just lives in what, the Hamptons? He's still
Hmm.
going through the same turmoils, all of that. And when I hear people talk about, oh, but I thought the jokes were funny and what it talked about, but I didn't really care about his super rich life. That is like the whole crux of the movie. And I think missing that is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I don't understand how you enjoy the rest of it then.
absolutely.
But hey, a lot of discussions to come for this one.
Absolutely. Circling back to the awards talk, as you mentioned, I think it's definitely going to be a strong contender in screenplay. I'd love to see
Screenplay,
Jeffrey
all the
Wright
way.
get the nomination here. I wouldn't. I would also not be surprised if they do some kind of Sterling K. Brown supporting actor
Easily.
campaign. Yeah,
That porch talk?
yeah. I mean, he's excellent here.
Ooh. Yeah.
So cutting, so funny, but in a dry way, but also just very real in the way
He's
that
also
Sterling K.
ripped,
Brown
bro.
can be. Yeah,
How?
he's like
How is he
one of
not in
those.
a Marvel movie?
I always
He's
forget how ripped he is, and then he
He's
just
like
shows up and
Marvel
does.
ripped, bro.
Yeah,
Crazy stuff. No,
Alright,
really
so-
good performances all around. Even some performances that aren't there as long as you expect them to be. That really caught me off guard. But yeah, even with all of my worries to the side, American Fiction easily is in my top 2 movies of the festival. I keep flipping between 2 of them. Both of them are going to get very interesting reactions once they both get released. But I think
Yeah.
this one was a blast, and I think it's very funny.
Yeah, we'll talk about American Fiction a lot more on Intercut, I'm sure. Let's move on to The Boy and the Heron, the latest film from Hayao Miyazaki, a film that was shrouded in mystery for a while with no trailers and no previews and
Images.
no images and no posters. It's just got a release date. That's all you get to know.
Not even
There's a little-
plushies to sell at the Miyazaki store.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to pay $80 for it, right? Those very expensive TIFF pop up, but talking about the movie itself, it is the latest retirement film from Miyazaki, except it's probably not a retirement film. I don't know if we need to talk too much about whether or not this is going to be his final film, but Art, you did get a chance to see it. I'm still waiting for it at New York. What did you think about the latest from the Japanese animation master?
We'll get deeper once you get to catch it. Alina, toss me one of those Miyazaki toys.
Hey,
Let me see which one's the best one over here. Whichever's the softest one. Right there. Miyazaki is a person who creates these beautiful worlds, these imaginative worlds. And I think that a big part of what people have really enjoyed about him is what I will call the Calvin and Hobbes bit, where they didn't do this. They didn't merchandise it to a degree for me to fall over here and just buy all of the stuff. Alita got these because she's a big Ponyo fan.
Oh, cute.
And I mean, how can you not get this one? This one was really cool. And as much as I love it, I'm here to tell you, like, they Pixar'd it. You know, they're pushing it to a point where this man makes fables, right? Like, he makes parables. And a big push for this final movie is this idea that, like, he stayed pure, and this is his finale and his goodbye, and he's coming to terms with that. Then it turns out he's not retiring, so I don't know how much that switches a lot of people's reviews that made it like all built up on that. I think it's a very good movie, and the more that I've thought about it, the more that I liked it. We woke up super early to see this film, and the animation, it doesn't matter if you're dead tired, will blow you away. It's so smooth. There are some shadow sequences where characters are engulfed in fire at the beginning. The way that some of the running sequences are shot, visceral, dude. The sound design is beautiful. The colors are fantastic. Everything that you want technically from a Miyazaki movie is there. And I know that was a big concern because now he's kind of allowed other animators to come in and it's not all him like he used to be. Great choice there. Story-wise, this is a mixture. It's right in the middle for me between what we were discussing as his more like grounded movies, which would be The Wind Rises, to the more whimsical movies that he's done early on in his career. And it's somewhere in the middle. I prefer the whimsicalness of it because I do think that there's still a lot of groundedness in there. This kind of teeters between the two of them, and honestly it made the more whimsical parts a little bit more jarring for me because whenever it was very serious I was like, all right, let's just stick with that. I truly believe that the original name for this movie, I don't know if you know it, is superior to The Boy and the Heron. I believe it's How You Live. I'll try to pull it up over here. Once I found that out after the movie, it puts you into the state of mind of what you need to be in for this film. About this kid who doesn't want to remain at home with his stepmother and ends up entering this magical world. The Boy and the Heron, sure, because it's him dealing with this whimsical heron, but I really do think it's a movie about how you traverse through life and the attitude that you have going into it and how you don't need to be in this otherworldly world to be able to affect the people closest to you. You can do that as a child already. I think I'm looking forward to revisiting this movie, especially with a lot of the interviews that I've heard and breakdowns that I've listened to between Miyazaki and his own son. I think all of that is very fascinating. As of now, my review for it, which I had at first and then I stuck with another one. This is How to Train Your Heron to a certain degree. I think people are really going to love this movie. People who are not fans of Miyazaki's previous works, I don't think this is going to be the one to change you. It would have been a really cool send-off, but I prefer the man continue to make movies. Very curious to see your breakdowns once you catch it in New York. But to me, I'm sticking with 4 stars at the moment still.
Cool. I mean, I'm very curious about it, as I would be just about any thing from Miyazaki. You were telling me that it's one of his grossest movies as well. I don't know if that's maybe too spoilery to get to the specifics of it, but I just thought that was an interesting reaction to a Miyazaki film.
A little gross.
In terms of it as a potential contender for best animated film, I feel like he's at the point in his career where maybe there's just like an interest in acknowledging his greatness, right? Like including him almost by default. But do you feel like this is maybe a movie that could even be a contender to win? Is it that good, or is it like too weird to be considered?
I prefer no, I don't think he could do anything that's weird. I mean, this man created he wonder like a Spirited Away is like a little girl following a ghost even, and no one like questions it. I think he's cleared in that sense because of where he comes from. I think you could take it away from some of the contenders that we have this year. I prefer Into the Spider-Verse movie. Right. I prefer, I don't even know what else we have off the top.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
Nah, absolutely not. Boy and the Heron, I could see it taking it away because he has that essence to him where it doesn't feel like you're watching the next big animated movie. It feels like you're, like I said, you're listening to a parable. It's like a prophet trying to tell you a tale that will be timeless years from now. That doesn't, again, it isn't associated with merch. It's associated with a theme, a story that's supposed to stick with you. That the older you get, when you come to rewatch it, you then start connecting not just with the boy, but with the other older characters who are involved. So because of that timelessness, it's easily going to get in as a nomination. I can easily see it getting the win as well, even if I prefer some of the other animated movies that are out there. For me, I see Chase asking about where it falls. It is not in my top ones. Again, I hold
Among
Spirited Away and a
Miyazaki
lot of
movies,
his,
yeah.
yeah, his older ones just a little bit higher. This is a little bit more serious. You are dealing with a more depressed child. So that's kind of the tone that it carries as he learns from it. I have it above middle for sure.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm definitely curious to catch up with the boy and the heron. We'll talk about that one more once I do. Tell me a little bit about Concrete Utopia. I think we just found out that this is South Korea's submission to the Oscars this year, I believe.
Yeah, they had announced that literally the day before I stood in the rush line. That's the main reason why I went there to catch this movie. It is one of the very few, because it's South Korean, that they had the whole cast out there, and boy, people were jumping over the Roy Thompson to get a closer view at them. It's got the boy from Parasite. People love this
Hey,
guy. They wouldn't even let them answer another question because they were all fangirling over him. This is a movie where a big disaster happens, leaving one massive condominium tower standing. And so everybody who lives there, who owns their spot, gets to stay, whereas they contemplate kicking everybody else out who is either just renting or doesn't have a place to stay there. And that's the movie. You get to see how certain characters develop. I think the strongest part of it is specifically this couple, where she's trying to stay true to helping other people, whereas he kind of becomes a soldier for the people running this place, deciding where they're going to ravage, who they leave out of it. And it's a very self-contained story for this. There are some really cool special effects sequences when dealing with a disaster, some flashbacks that happen here or there. But I think a lot of people are really going to vibe with this movie.
mm-hmm.
I've liked it a bit more since I've seen it. And that mainly comes from like the character interactions and learning more about just how Korea deals with their property and who owns a home, and how that really kind of leads to where they stand in society. And this is a movie where it cuts through all that and kind of showcases that this is what Korea is going through now. And if they were to ever go through a disaster, let's show you exactly what it would look like in the most dire of circumstances. I've heard people call this a religious movie. No, I think it's more of a political movie, if anything, especially with dealing with, again, ownership and who is deemed a bigger citizen than somebody else. But then also kind of plays with some people can contribute more even if they don't own that land, and who would you keep, who would you not. Pretty good thriller, pretty good drama. I don't think it's in my top 5 to score out of the
Yeah.
submissions.
And also
But
just the thriller
keep an eye out for it.
aspects of it that you're talking about sound a little unusual for what the Oscars like, I
Yeah.
guess. But I don't know if it's well executed,
Well,
then maybe it's got a shot.
Yeah, it could be. I
It's
I
not.
can't think of another one from South Korea that I would pick,
Yeah.
but it's a solid submission to have, and I think a lot of people are really going to vibe with it and like the themes that they have in there. And I think it has a
Cool.
very very solid ending.
Yeah, I'm curious to check that one out as well. Speaking of international film submissions to the Oscars, let's talk about Tunisia's pick, which is Four Daughters. You came out of this one raving to me about it. So let me know why I got to put this near the top of my watch list.
You have to, man. Towards the end of the fest, I was just looking up, making audibles right there on what was going to be the final movies that we were going to catch. I saw this one was shortlisted for Tunisia. I was like, it's got to be this one. Final movie I saw out of the festival. When I went to go get a coffee, the guy asked me, "What'd you just see?" I was like, Four Daughters. He goes, "That sounds interesting. What is it about?" I'm like, Mr. Barista Man, it's about a family where two of the daughters are playing themselves in this documentary as they cast the two older sisters as with actresses because they went missing. And the whole story retells what happened by also casting an actress to play the mother, and the director allowing the subjects to direct the movie and reenactments. And it's through the direction that's being caught that you get to know more about the story than just seeing the reenactment. And then the post reenactment, as they talk to the actors and the real daughters with the actor daughters, creates such an interesting dynamic that it becomes this documentary experiment that really gets to the core of a lot of the emotions and what was happening and what the mom thought she was escaping to maybe only just cause that and throw that upon her own daughters as well. Fascinating, fascinating documentary. One of the most interesting perspectives to take for a documentary. I highly recommend it. You know, there's always a documentary that makes it into the international list. This would be my pick out of all of them. I know we were talking about maybe Eternal Memory being one.
Chile didn't submit that one, so
Chile didn't submit it.
Yeah,
this one for sure would be one to put there. I only have one little gripe, and it would be the more that you learn about them and you realize very little, like, oh, you know, they did have some time in the media before. It makes you wonder, like, okay, you guys have been in front of cameras, so how does being in front of these cameras also kind of instigate where the story goes? But nah, I would highly recommend having this on your radar. This is also playing at Chicago. It just got announced. If you are in the area, do yourself a favor and go catch this movie. A lot of people came out just drenched. A lot of people also came out wondering, is that what I thought happened? I don't know. They couldn't pick up that someone saying something bad really happened to me meant something unless there was a recreation. So know that there are some daunting recreations that they do, but then they will tell you a lot of the more grotesque ones, darker ones.
Yeah.
But some people kind of were asking what that meant, and I'm like, I think it's pretty obvious. So know that it does a lot of showing, but also a lot of telling.
Nice. I love something that sort of like blurs the lines of documentary and fiction. So I don't know, maybe we're getting a little like Nathan Fielder here with
this one's
Tunisia's pick.
Hey, bro, this is that best example of that Nathan Fielder experiment.
Yeah.
Done to the best of its ability to get raw emotions out. For sure.
Yeah. I was having trouble confusing 4 Daughters with his 3 Daughters, because I know you really liked 4 Daughters, but I know a lot of people came out of the festival loving his 3 Daughters. I heard several people say that was among the best films that they saw there. I know you liked it as well. I ended up missing it. It is the latest from Azazel Jacobs, whose last film I didn't vibe with as much, French Exit, but the 2 films he made before that, The Lovers and Terry, I liked quite a bit. So I'm definitely curious about his 3 Daughters. What did you like about it?
I was with you. I was kind of on the edges of it, but you look at that cast, and it's got some of my favorites, dude. First of all, Carrie Coon, seeing her live, she is one of the best performers out there. And I was a little iffy because she begins this very stilted. This is a movie where 3 daughters are waiting for their father, who's on bed rest, to pass. So it's all mainly happening in this apartment. Besides Carrie Coon, who's the eldest, you have Natasha Lyonne. Let's go, Natasha, bro. She knocks it out of the park in this one. I absolutely adored her performance, mixed alongside who would be the third sister.
Elizabeth Olsen.
Elizabeth Olsen. They all have these crazy quirks. If Natasha Lyonne seems like the most normal sister in a trio, that is telling you a lot about what is happening with this family dynamic. This could be like a stage play, because it really is just trying to figure out what's going to happen with their father. Can they push for some extra hospice or for things to go in a different direction? To me, all of them stand out. You also have, what's his name? The homie who's in Fences. You should see his name somewhere, and I think it's in the second line.
I'm not sure which one of these dudes.
Let's see, zoom in, because I can't see from there. Not J.O. Sanders. Right there, Giovanna Depo. He was also in Overlord and such.
Oh, that dude, yeah.
Bro, he's got a banger of a scene in this movie as well.
Babylon.
And Babylon as well. He kills it in this movie. I think this is very much a performance-driven movie that also, to me, has a very strong script. The more that you learn about these sisters and their upbringing, I would highly recommend it. It is a very talky movie, and if that's not what you're looking forward to, then wait for the moment until you are. But if you're ready for it and you've been hearing great things about the performances, they're going to knock you out of the park.
Yeah, definitely curious to catch up with his 3 Daughters. For me, one of my standouts is The Holdovers, the latest for
Beautiful
Alexander Payne. Yeah, I mean, that trailer itself is just like a work of art.
Trailer is crazy, dude.
But the movie, I think, really lived up to it. To me, it's a warm blanket. It's a hot cup of cocoa. You know, it's just a very cozy movie about this kind of mean teacher who's forced to stay over the winter holiday to take care of some kids who can't go home to their families at a boarding school. But what it really develops into is this very lovable dynamic between the sort of like unlikely family of Paul Giamatti's teacher, Divine Joy Randolph playing the cook at the school, and the newcomer Dominic Sessa, who they found at he was a senior at one of the schools that they shot at, and it's his first film role, and he's absolutely incredible in it. Just a huge discovery. I heard your woo on Divine Joy Randolph. That is very worthy, because she is radiant in this movie. Just like
as always,
the depth of her performance is so like palpable. She's going through so much, but she is such this like light for the other people in the film. It's just got this really tender heart that's undeniable. I sort of felt myself welling up several times in the movie, but it's also very fun, very funny. It's got this kind of like subversive nature to it, because it's like sort of undressing the like stuffiness of this boarding school at times, and revealing kind of the like hidden nature of these people and the things that they don't want to tell each other. To me, it's like a classic film about like lovable oddballs and outcasts who are able to find happiness amongst each other. Just one of the best versions of it imaginable. And also, like, we haven't talked about how amazing the design of it is, the way it's shot, the way it's the audio is recorded. It all really evokes an early 70s movie. I was able to see a Q&A from Alexander Payne, and he was talking about how they didn't want it to feel like a film that was like made to feel like it was in the 1970s. They wanted to feel like a lost movie that was just discovered from the 1970s. And I think they really pulled that off.
Better than Mank?
I liked it better than Mank for sure. I mean, the
technical side, like you said, of finding it,
yeah, the technical aspects. I mean, look, Fincher has a certain like ability to make things feel immersive, but I don't know. This feels more like thematically of its time too, because Mank feels like a modern script shot kind of old-fashioned.
He overdoes it.
Yeah,
but here it's the easiness of it that
it all could have just been lifted from 1970. It's pretty incredible.
Damn,
I loved this one quite a bit.
I heard nothing. I'd be going up the escalators of the Scotiabank, and just two guys just crying over the holdovers, like holding each other. So this is the one that I heard the most great things about. If you scroll down, you can see that a lot of our peers also absolutely adored this movie. I've heard no bad things really coming out of this. Some people who are disappointed. I think they've never been held over or did go home for the holidays. But for the most part, I've heard nothing but great things. And every time I see the poster, the still that's up there, as well as the trailer, dude, I have like a specific category of what I call snowy movies.
Yeah.
A movie that you see and you come out with snow outside and you just think about it on the drive home or wherever, and this fits that description completely. And again, that comes down to this being the fall season of movies that we really adore. I saw someone ask if you're going to answer that question. Is this Payne's best film?
I mean, I really like Alexander Payne. I think he's got a couple great movies. This is among them for me, for sure. I don't know if I have it above Election or Citizen Ruth, but it's probably a top 5 Alexander Payne movie for me, at least.
Damn, I haven't seen Citizen Ruth, so I'm going to have to catch that then.
Yeah, great movie. But The Holdovers, I'm really excited for more people to catch that one. It is an excellent movie.
Nice. And this is probably one of the first ones, I think. American Fiction is supposed to be on Thanksgiving. Holdovers should be coming out and wide by everybody's Thanksgiving as well. So hopefully everyone has a chance to see it in theaters.
October 27th, I believe, in limited.
Oh, that's even old. Okay, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
All right, I'm catching a really good theater.
Yeah. Let's move on to Lee, which is directed by Ellen Kuras. That was a really eye-catching name for me, less for the films and shows that she's directed, because those have been a bit spotty, but more so for her work as a cinematographer, particularly on films directed by Michel Gondry, like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and Be Kind,
Hey.
Rewind. She's worked with Spike Lee, and she's
American Utopia, yeah.
Yeah, even worked on Ted Demi's Blow. You know, a lot of iconic films.
Hey,
for
Pretend
sure.
It's a City.
Yes, Scorsese there too. But Lee is her, I think, it might be her feature directorial debut. Maybe it's her second film.
Something like that, yeah.
And it stars Kate Winslet as a model turned photographer, Elizabeth Lee Miller, who did a lot of war correspondent photography during the Second World War, was in Germany on the front lines taking pictures of the wounded and of the concentration camps and just all the devastation. It is, as a story, a fairly solid but unspectacular World War II historical biopic. You know, it sort of shows the evolution from Hitler is this like idea, but not necessarily like a threat that people outside of Germany are really concerned about, to, you know, the being launched into the war and feeling like you need to Lee being called to action in some ways. I think, you know, Kate Winslet is one of our great actresses. I don't really find she has a lot of like false notes. She's excellent here, you know, particularly she's one of our best English actresses at doing an American accent, just a pitch perfect American accent here. But she also like gets the depth of the character, the toughness, but also the vulnerability of it. I think it's a really excellent performance from her. The performance that really caught my eye, though, was not Marion Cotillard or Andrea Riseborough or Alexander Skarsgård or even Josh O'Connor, all good actors who do a good job here. It was Andy Samberg. Andy Samberg is like the second lead of this movie, kind of her like sidekick, co-photographer, war correspondent, and he has like a period accurate accent and everything, and is kind of like heartbreaking and amazing in this film. Like, I don't think it's gonna happen, but I would be behind the Andy Samberg Best Supporting Actor campaign.
As a nom?
I would be for it. I mean, he's just like very heartbreaking in this film. I think he carries a lot of the emotionality of it because, you know, Lee as this character is puts a lot of a tougher front, but he like allows for the moments to really sink in. And I just thought he was charming in the way that we know Andy Samberg can be, but also dramatic in a way that I haven't really seen him do much of.
Comedy actors, baby.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I love him, so I was really taken by that. The movie is mostly like fine, sometimes like pretty profound, but I don't know. It's not. World War II is like really well trodden ground, so I don't think this is going to be a movie that blows anybody away. And it's not like the most technically brilliant or beautifully put together film. I think it's worth watching, but it's not necessarily going to be top of anybody's watch list, and I wouldn't be surprised if it does kind of get completely overlooked when it comes to awards season.
Damn. I mean, I moved it because I heard you guys saying that it was a little weird. I heard about a bathtub scene.
Yeah.
I was like, that sounds a little weird, but I had heard things about the ending, so I'm gonna need you to tell me what that ending was, because people say
it's a good ending.
That as much as they don't like the first, they called it a Hallmark movie in the first half.
Yeah,
they said that the ending's really solid. So
I think some people are being a little harsh on this movie, and I think the ending really brings it together. Gotcha. I mean, you know, there's the TIFF goggles in two ways, right? There's the like, I'm at a film festival and having such a great time. This is the best movie ever, or this movie wasn't the greatest thing I've ever seen, so it sucks and it wasted my time. And maybe it's getting a little bit of that.
And then they leave halfway through, and you're like, wait. Shout out Andy Samberg. There's another performance that he also had this year, if you remember, in South by. I don't want to spoil the movie that he's in.
Yes.
So maybe he's got a real big acting.
He is in the trailer for that one. I was a little disappointed.
Oh, he is.
But it is.
Oh, that's like, disappointing.
Yeah.
Damn. Okay. Oh, Lee, sounds good. Also, it's they're collabing again. You know how long it took me? We kept mentioning she's a cinematographer of Eternal Sunshine. And we're like, well, she's also in Eternal Sunshine.
Yeah. I think that's a lot of the reason why they worked on it. Kate apparently was the one who brought this to her. I think she had been wanting to make a story of this.
Man, she should have been there as producer.
Yeah.
All right, tell me about the new one from the boy.
Michel Franco back again. I don't know if this is his English language debut. I think it
His
is,
second.
but his
His
second.
second.
Okay,
That
okay.
that second one right there. The one in orange. I forget. Sundown. I
Yeah,
think it
Sundown.
was. We both skipped it at multiple festivals. It's sitting on Hulu. We'll catch up with it. But
Yeah.
this one looks like it's got a duo that I was really anticipating. I missed this one.
Yeah, I mean, look, Peter Sarsgaard, Jessica Chastain. I think when they're cooking, they're some of our best actors out there.
For sure.
They definitely like have some misses on their track record, but they are really capable. And given the right material, like they are very compelling to watch. And I do think that there are times when like they are just extremely compelling opposite each other in this movie. It is just also
Nice.
like kind of a baffling movie, and I'm not sure I like have a concrete opinion about this because it is a movie that touches on so many things in ways that sort of feel like you shouldn't do that if you're not going to then dive into that subplot.
That's Michelle.
Yeah, but exactly that is kind of his style, right? I mean, it's a movie that touches on assault and incest and
Oh.
trauma and
Oh.
false allegations and memory, obviously from the title.
Yeah.
What the basic premise here essentially is that Jessica Chastain plays a social worker whose life sort of intertwines with this man who's suffering from early onset dementia. And it's sort of about, in some ways, it's about this woman who remembers too much and a man who can't remember enough.
That's a
I
good.
guess.
Hey, that's a good one.
Yeah, right.
I like that log line.
Yeah, and there is this like weird poignancy to it, but it's also got these strange sort of threads that I honestly am having trouble cohering into one movie. It kind of feels like it has two ideas and it sort of tried to find a middle ground
Damn.
for it.
Okay.
I found it to be compelling. I found it to be really well acted. There are like scenes that are very memorable, but there's also some stuff that just feels like inhumanly bizarre. Like I don't understand your reaction in this moment, Jessica Chastain. Like why are you acting like this? So it's compelling and it's well acted. I don't think it's going to be like in awards conversations because it is a little bit strange in terms of all that it's trying to incorporate, but I still found it to be like an interesting film for sure.
Yeah. All right. I might have that one on my radar.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into the latest from Taika Waititi. This one is Next Goal Wins. I think you did not catch this one at Toronto Art, or did?
I did.
Okay,
I don't
great.
know why. Hey, dude, I did everything to get rid of my ticket to catch something that is going to be new. For a second, I held on to it because I think he joked that this isn't coming out until 2024. I think that was just a bit he was doing.
Yeah.
I ended up with a ticket. It was at the Visa Screening Room, which is one of the more nicer Dolby-like theaters there. You start off, bro.
All right, so I have this in our awards contender section because I think a lot of people came into this expecting it to be a front runner for People's Choice, and as we're talking about, People's Choice often comes hand in hand with an Oscar nomination. Plus, Taika does have his history with Jojo Rabbit at TIFF, so you know maybe
People's Choice.
Maybe he's got another one in the bag. I think the less we talk about Jojo Rabbit, the better. This one, coincidentally or not, I caught it on the anniversary of 9/11. It's an adaptation of the documentary of the same name, Next Goal Wins, that came out, I think, in 2014, about a Dutch coach who's hired by the U.S. Soccer Federation to take over American Samoa and turn them from the last place ranked team in the world into something better than that, maybe try to qualify for a World Cup, mostly just try to score a goal.
A goal.
And like, look, it's a pretty goofy concept, I guess, and Taika is like a goofy guy. There's times where that sort of works. There's some sort of like common chemistry there, but it has like this the feel of a common like sports underdog story. But to me, I guess where my problems start with the film is like I want to compare it to like The Big Green or Kicking and Screaming. These movies,
the second one. Yeah.
These movies where comedians as play the coach to a bunch of toddlers and try to get them to be better at soccer. Except the problem here is it's not a bunch of toddlers, but it's a bunch of American Samoans, and it sort of just infantilizes all of them in this kind of strange, condescending way. They all sort of take on the personality of Korg. Like they don't have unique personalities. They're all just kind of Korg. And
according to him,
yeah,
his Korg and everyone there is supposed to just be his culture, right? Like that's kind of what he's done. He's going to make the sports movie. He's going to make the Marvel movie. He's going to make whatever the genre is with that same, he doesn't call it Korg. He calls it his style, his sense of humor, whatever it is, right? It'd be like putting the Michael Pena Ant-Man 2 overly talking Hispanic in every single like genre and then just saying like, oh, there you go, that's the representation.
Yeah.
I heard the interview where he said, I don't know anything about sports.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that from watching his production of soccer scenes.
You would know exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it just sort of like it never really feels like a compelling sports film, you know. Like it doesn't. It wants to cut away from the soccer as much as possible to give you kind of quirky dialogue and like treat people in American Samoa like they're like backwards or whatever. And I don't know. It didn't really work for me. There are some jokes that I found funny, but there's so many hacky ones as well. There's like a part where Michael Fassbender sort of does the quote from Taken as if that isn't like a joke that your grandpa knows by now. You know, it's just not, it's not fresh at all, which is a shame because I do think there'd be a really fun story to tell here, but it falls into so many tropes that I don't know. I was pretty bored by it. Michael Fassbender is fine. You know, I don't think he is he's interesting at least to watch, but there's not a lot for him to do here. I also feel like the way that the film it utilizes its trans character or it is like kind of like backwards in terms of like propping her up as this sort of like unique special, like I don't know, like it feels, I don't know exactly how to put the words to it, but it also feels infantilizing in a way, which is the opposite of like her in the documentary where she's just part of the team and it's not really a big thing. They like include weird transphobia in the movie to try and make a point that wasn't really an issue in the documentary. I find it all kind of a bit icky. I didn't think it was like, so it didn't make me want to pull my hair out. I liked it more than Jojo Rabbit, but I didn't think it's very good. And it seems like a lot of people agree that this isn't going to go anywhere in like the awards race.
Yeah, it seemed pretty standard. I haven't seen the doc yet, so I'm very curious to see it. But I know she was there also to present as well.
Yeah,
and
real
the
life
coach was there, and he was talking about like, yeah, this is like the first time we've met. So like, I don't really see the passion in the passion project to be the thing that you took a little bit off to focus on amongst all the other bigger movies. I had heard a lot of pushback for that scene as well. If it's not in the documentary, I don't see why it's needed. In the context of it, the guy's an asshole. And he gets a DUI like the following scene. So I did see a lot of people like really upset as if like it was supposed to be a good thing in the movie. I don't think it's a good thing in the movie. But you take that, and then like you said, how they're almost parading, as you're saying, you're not really acknowledging her. You're almost like putting her on a pedestal to kind of be the marketing for the movie.
Yeah.
And it feels like you're making up for it as well. And I think his speech at the Q&A that he had for the intro that I listened back to, someone can praise you to the point that it's condescending.
Yes, exactly. Like
it's a fine movie. It's right. Like you're almost like, what else do you want to get into?
I don't know, man.
I want more from Taika. Taika's a funny guy. He can do different things. I told you there's an after credit scene. Pointless, bro.
Yeah, dude. His whole role in the film is kind of pointless. Like he just shoehorns himself in way too much here, and like I like so much of what Taika has done, but he is a victim of his own like hype in some ways. Like I think he thinks he's now the funniest thing, and I think he needs to take a lot more time and like actually work on a good script for a change.
He made a Billy. He made a Billy off of Thor 4. Who's gonna tell him?
Exactly. All right, let's move from one of my least favorites from the fest to maybe my favorite of the fest. I was pretty surprised and taken with Origin, the latest from Ava DuVernay, a late addition to Toronto. I don't think it was even in the lineup when we did our preview episode on Intercut, but they screened it at Venice and they brought it to Toronto as well. A really interesting film that is kind of an adaptation of Isabel Wilkerson's novel, or excuse me, nonfiction book, Cast. But being that that's a nonfiction book, Ava DuVernay chooses to center the narrative around Isabel Wilkerson, kind of make it a biopic of her writing this movie. And it becomes this really interesting, almost like investigative journalist showcase of her diving into the interconnectivity of modes of discrimination around the world. It is a really like heady idea. It is a big subject to tackle in a narrative film, but I somehow think that Ava DuVernay gets her hands around it. It is really ambitious. It spans several decades, several countries. It shows all these tragedies happening both on a greater global spectrum and on a more focused spectrum in just Isabel Wilkerson's life, because she went through a lot of personal tragedies in her journey to writing this book. But I think what she's created here is like a uniquely cinematic look at structures of racism and discrimination around the world. I was so surprised by what a cogent argument it makes for the interconnectivity of these systems and how emotionally and thematically resonant it is too. I was so swept away by it. It's beautifully shot. In particular, cinematographer Matthew J. Lloyd was on that. I thought Anjanou Ellis, who plays Isabel Wilkerson, is amazing in this film, probably deserving of some Best Actress recognition. And for me, this might be Ava DuVernay's best film. You know, we both love the Netflix show. What is it? When They See Us. I feel like I'm missing the title.
That's it.
When They See Us. But in terms of her film work, it's either this or Selma, and I think I like this a bit more than Selma.
I think it's ballsy to take what is a thesis and turn it into a drama.
Yeah.
To be able to take parts of her life to then use that as a way to be able to showcase someone learning, I think is the most profound thing to put in the movie. You're seeing somebody who was doubted, to put the MJ meme, she took it personally and then went down to figure out how she was going to write this book. And I've heard a lot of people complain about it going from like a drama to a documentary. Then I've heard some people talk about that it goes from a documentary to a drama. So there's a lot of debate on like whether it's good from the way that it presents itself. I've seen that be like a really big issue.
Mm-hmm.
So now that you know how it's presented, if you watch it, like, I don't know, it's like watching a found footage for the first time going, this isn't how cameras are set up. And now, it's not really that much of a worry.
People are like policing structure rather than like taking the movie for what it is. Yeah.
I think performance-wise, Anjanou is fantastic. Is it literally race the movie? Yeah. I can see it being the wokest movie of the festival because of what it's talking about. But people get this idea of like, I mean, that's the subject of the story, especially with what bookends the movie is obviously a really prolific incident that I would say is very much connected to Ava. There is a meta-ness there of when Ava started and this incident. So to kind of almost put that on screen to dramatize it but also dissect it, I think is a really big full circle moment for her. I agree with the way that it's shot, but more than anything, it's that follow through of an author, a journalist turned author, who is learning things as she goes. And to me, I love seeing that. It may be the nerdiest thing, but I don't think we see a lot of that. I think in sports movies, we see the training montage and we know what that's building up to. Yeah. We never find that boring as sports fans, but we rarely get to see someone figure something out and for it to be told in such a profound way. Like, people find this boring because she's going from like place to place. I'm like, what are you talking about? We travel hopping. But then she says it. No, she says it, and then there's like a reenactment to it where they hired actors to play those roles.
Totally. Like, this is All the President's Men, or this is Spotlight. But instead of publishing a news article, this is like publishing a dissertation on race.
It's a lot closer to Spotlight, bro.
Yeah, for sure. But like,
I've seen a lot of people who depend on. It's funny because a lot of people are calling this woke, but to a degree, it's almost getting rid of wokeness to tell you what the real issue is. And I
yeah,
feel like some people who may have been using race a lot to get on top are like, wait, you're getting rid of the thing that was helping me out here.
yeah,
I think it is told to perfection. And what you brought up, there is a point in the movie where she figures something out.
hmm
Bro, we're not even talking about a movie at that point.
yeah.
None of you people who go through World War II have ever looked through the minutes to this one speech to discover what she did. That was crazy. That is one of the
Yeah.
craziest moments out of the festival, a profound scene in movies.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're using the word woke to engage with this movie, then you're not really like having an open discussion with what this movie's trying to do. Like, yeah, it is obviously like a movie about race. That's the whole book that she's
Yeah,
adapting.
but you
And
know how
like,
people
look,
are. They hear
yeah,
one word and they're done, right?
exactly right. And look, if that's not the movie that you're willing to sit down for, don't sit down for it. It's not for
But the
you.
movie agrees with you. It even
Yeah.
has the same thing that you said. If you're engaging with something as woke, then you're not going to agree with it. The movie even engages in going as far as calling something racist as a default isn't the way to fix something.
Yes, yes.
Like, it is agreeing a lot more with the people who are hating on the movie than they realize.
Absolutely.
And again, it's one of those things where we're just a little too close to it. And if you were to ask somebody what they disagree with, it'd be like, no, but that's actually what the movie's talking about. Exactly what you disagree with.
Yeah.
I look. I think it was a very genius way to turn the book into a movie with performances outside of Ingenue, who is fantastic and always has been fantastic. John Bernthal, shout out to the man. Niecy Nash,
Yeah.
shout out to her, bro.
Yeah.
Incredible supporting
Steals a lot of the
performance.
movie. Yeah.
Easily. And also is the one who's like, yo, yeah, those are big words. Can you break it down here at this barbecue for how I should perceive what you're trying to tell me?
Absolutely.
Nah, it's a standout. I'm glad she's back making feature-length movies. Can't wait.
All right. Let's move on to Rustin. This is an upcoming
Tell me.
Netflix movie directed by George C. Wolfe, who's previously done Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. He's also like a legendary theater director. And this one stars Coleman Domingo as the legendary gay civil rights activist Bayard Rustin, who is partially responsible for organizing Martin Luther King's March on Washington. It is a fairly like standard historical biopic in some senses. I think what's interesting about it is it kind of is like a backroom negotiation style movie, but about
Okay.
like civil rights demonstrations and permits and protests and or organizing. And those are the things about it that were pretty interesting to me. When it does get into the personal life drama, it does get into more like standard melodrama, deals issues of being willing, his ability to be open at a time when people are being persecuted for being gay, and sort of the I don't know if you want to call it irony or just like whatever, the intersectionality of that struggle, like where they're fighting for the liberation of black people while he's simultaneously experiencing a different type of oppression because he's gay. It when it works, it is largely off the back of Coleman Domingo, who I think has evolved into one of our like great character actors. He's popped up in lots and lots of movies recently, and here he gets to take center stage as Bayard Rustin. There's also a great cast around him. We talked about Jeffrey Wright earlier. He's got a small part here. Divine Joy Randolph as well, small part here. Chris Rock, CCH Pounder, lots of recognizable faces. I think there's just something that is like not super cinematic about it. The way that it's cut sometimes feels a little bit jarring and doesn't swell to the climax the way that you might want it to. It's effective, but it is a little bit forgettable. So it's probably like it's a good Netflix watch, right? Like that's probably the right platform for it.
Ma Rainey was also Netflix, if I'm not mistaken, and
Yeah.
I felt in the same way that you're saying, with that being so contained, that was one where it's like, it's not the editing or the movement, it's the performances that really stand out. So sounds like it's the same.
Yeah, definitely. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Coleman maybe break through in Best Actor, but I also could see this one getting overlooked. I feel like I've responded a little more positively than most folks to it too. So
Gotcha.
yeah. Let's talk about another international submission. This one is Chile's submission. You caught The Settlers. Tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, if you've seen one of the previous recommendations we've given with Godland, which also got picked up as its country submission. Look, there's a lot of ones from Chile. At the end of it all, I've liked every submission from Chile. Maybe Eternal Memory, I think, would have done a little bit better at the heartstrings because this is a cold one. This is following three surveyors, practically. One who considers himself an Englishman, the American cowboy, and then you have the native in the back who are trying to figure out how much land in Chile they're going to get. This is a movie where the more you know about the history of Chile, the more it makes sense because they're not overly explaining everything to you. They are trying to divide the land that would become this country. And it jumps around a bit in terms of how they're going about it, these grotesque acts that they do. It all looks stunning with the way that it's filmed, I believe also on film.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little slow, but that's because it builds up to these moments of what is considered a profound moment for Chile that they only reach through all of these hidden secrets. I very much enjoyed it. We were like one of 5 people who saw the big eye for this. Nobody showed up for it because it is kind of a long one in the way that they're traversing through it. But I think it stands out for its cinematography. And while I wouldn't put it as one of my 5 to submit or to make it for the top 5, it's one that stuck with me. I like the ending to it. I think it's kind of it implies something a lot darker, and I would recommend to watch for those who are willing to seek out international films. I think this one's pretty good. It's not gonna be for everyone, but it's pretty good.
Cool. I think this one's also at New York, so I'll catch up with it soon.
You should give it. Yeah, it's beautiful on the big screen.
Nice. Germany selected The Teacher's Lounge for international feature. This is one that we luckily caught before the festival, and to me, it was like the first movie I saw for TIFF that I thought was really good. I thought this was a really effective kind of sly thriller about this woman who works at a school for, I think it's like a lower school, and when she suspects one of her students of theft, she installs a camera or she starts to film in the teacher's lounge, which spirals out of control very quickly as accusations are thrown back and forth, and people sort of react to their newfound infamies, I guess, if you want to call it that. This is just like a kind of movie that feels like watching a car roll down a hill and just pick up more and more damage. Like there's no real way to stop it once the ball gets rolling, but you just see the fallout getting worse and worse and worse. It is pretty precisely told. I thought the pacing and the character writing was really excellent in this one. To me, it's definitely a standout. I would consider it a potential threat to get nominated in Best Foreign for sure.
I also believe it should make it in as one of the top 5s because I think this is a near perfect movie.
Yeah.
Up until the ending, and then I was just like, this is an ending. This is a choice that's being made.
Yeah.
I just feel that there was so much because it feels so lived in and like it's a sprawling tale of every division in the school and how they're taking what is, this pandemic, I don't know what you want to call it, of things going missing for what has been years. And the way that it ends, I feel like they didn't wrap everything up as much as they could have because they leave so many dangling things. So that's the only reason why I'm not like fully giving this an even higher rating. But to me, you need to watch the performances in this movie. And like Zach said, the way that it builds up and these misconstrued ways of accusing somebody or the route that you took to get there actually creates more problems and solutions. It is an incredible movie. Man, if it would have stuck that ending for me, I'm willing to rewatch it. Maybe I'm missing something. But if it would have stuck that ending even more, I'd be talking about one of my favorite movies of the year. Teacher's Lounge is fantastic. And there are a lot of other Teacher's movies we'll be talking about. And this is a standout to it.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Those are most of the films that we think are potential awards contenders. Another trend that we noticed at this year's TIFF was all the films that are directed by actors, whether debuts or maybe second films.
Yeah.
A lot of films coming from actors. Neither of us saw Ezra, which is from Tony Goldwyn. Neither of us saw Hell of a Summer from Finn Wolfhard, but I've heard not so stellar things about that one, so we maybe made a good choice steering clear. We also didn't watch North Star, directed by Kristen Scott Thomas, which did not get the best reviews on Letterboxd. So again, maybe for the best. You did get to go to, I believe, the world premiere of Gonzo Girl from Patricia Arquette, which tells the story of a young girl or a young college graduate interning for a famed author who kind of resembles Hunter S. Thompson, even if they don't call him Hunter S. Thompson in the movie.
I thought they do.
Oh, do they? I didn't see it. You did. Um, I don't. Whatever. Anyway, he's played by Willem Dafoe. The student is played by Camilla Monroe. How did you think the film worked from Patricia Arquette?
So it's supposed to be about the secretary in her memoirs. I think her kid was there to kind of like be honor her behalf. Everybody got to talk about this movie as well, so I don't know where it is in the interim either. But it was cool to see Willem Dafoe discuss the movie and talking about how crazy he needed to be for it. It's a drug-filled fest. That's all it is. She gets hired to help this guy write, who needs to do like 3 lines of cocaine, acid, weed, a bunch of alcohol, and then like who knows what else before he can get the typewriter going. If that's what you're looking forward to, you have drug scenes galore. I think the use of drugs in the movie is a perfect cop-out for maybe some of the shoddiest direction possible. The best thing that I could give this movie is that while if you are interested in Hunter, the more you know about him, maybe the better for some of the amalgamations that they do. If you look at the cast there, Nicholson's kid is in the movie, and he plays a character who's supposed to be an amalgamation of actors. So he's like this one dude who continues to appear. So according to her memoir, that would have been several actors. But on one occasion, the guy does come in, and they go, "I thought you were supposed to be filming Batman." And I'm like, "Are you playing your father? Was your father a part of a lot of these writing sequences and nights out that they had?" The main reason she made this movie is because it's following a woman who wants to be a writer, but her looks get in the way. In the same way that Patricia Arquette has felt that in her career, she is a very big actress who was very much cast for her looks and was kind of a muse for a lot of people. You could see that from the movie, and then she cements it in the Q&A. And from there, I respect a lot of that. That is a very big point she's been trying to make. Even going back to her Oscar win for Boyhood, that was a big part of her speech, the braveness to be able to be filmed throughout the decades. I think that's a redeeming part of the movie, but I can't say that the direction was that great or that a lot of the sequences aren't just repeating, this turmoil that this girl's going through, but kind of telling you that as long as you stick it out, you'll be able to find yourself. And I don't know, it kind of becomes an indictment on these types of figures who use these muses, but then kind of going like, but stick it out, because what else is everybody else going to do? So it's very messy, but it uses the excuse of it being a drug-filled, Gonzo story as it being the reason for why it's told that way. I thought it was okay. I see me giving it less of a score and a rewatch than it going higher for sure.
Okay. Let's also talk a little bit about Knox Goes Away. I think we were both at the world premiere of this
world premiere.
Michael Keaton's second film behind the camera, and his second film behind the camera in which he stars as a hitman. I guess he's got a thing for that. This time he's playing a contract killer that's been diagnosed with a fast-moving form of dementia. So he has not months, but weeks before he will not have all his faculties, I guess you can say.
Yeah.
So he hatches a plan to help his son. And it's just about the most convenient story of dementia I've ever seen. I mean, the tragedy of watching a film like Still Alice is that like she's not able to be there in the way that she previously was. Like she's losing these aspects of herself. But Knox Goes Away has this vibe of like we're pulling one over on dementia, you guys, and it just like doesn't really make a lot of sense. I feel like there's some interesting ideas. They almost like want to do Memento, but don't rip off Memento.
Yeah.
And I think you got to go like deeper into the minutia of that. And also maybe have Al Pacino do more than one take next time.
Stop, bro. I love Al Pacino.
It's really got that Clint Eastwood, like we're going to be out of here before dinner energy to it.
Maybe they forgot what the good take was, in the editing booth.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know, man. Like Keaton's perfectly watchable, James Marsden's perfectly watchable, but it all just feels way, way too convenient to really, have any kind of dramatic tension.
It's corny, it's cheesy. Like Zach said, the first scene is like, you got dementia, but like the faster version. And then from there, yeah, it's never really an obstacle. It's kind of just like a ticking time bomb for him, but he never really forgets the things that don't help his plan go away. And he's also being followed by a bunch of cops, who are trying to catch up to him, but he's also trying to like do a cat and mouse, trick them into going the other way. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it either, but I thought it was watchable. There's a bunch of corny one-liners, so if that's your thing, sure, it's fine. A low rent it for me.
Yeah. Still, Knox Goes Away might be better than our next film that comes directed by an actor, Chris Pine's debut, Poolman. I sat next to you at the press and industry screening of this one, and I kept a
Last
little
one.
tally in my notebook of every walkout. Ended up with 55, which is
You got that on you?
I actually don't know where I put my notebook.
You got to show the text. You got to show the monumental.
I'll pull up. Oh, here it is. I'll pull up the tweet. Maybe that'll be easier.
Yeah,
But
we were
yeah,
sitting there, and we just, at a certain point, would hit moments in the movie where Chris Pine would do something, and a mass exodus would occur. And at a certain point, Zach's like, "All right, I got to start keeping track of this."
I mean, it's ridiculous. It was just more and more people were like piling out of this movie. Just they had enough of his antics because the film is got this really weird energy. Here, I found my page. I don't know how visible that is at the bottom there.
Oh, hold
but,
on, I got you. Give it a second. 3, 2. There you go.
Yeah, that guy right there. All those like I had to start a second line of tallies.
That's ridiculous.
Just to get them all in. 55 people. It was probably like at least a seventh of the auditorium, if not a little bit more than that. Yeah, it was.
It was, bro. There was one time a whole group of like 5 got up to leave, and when they were leaving, the guy who was like was like, letting him go through said, "Screw it, I'll go with you."
Yeah. I mean, I've never seen heckling at a press and industry screening.
Let's talk about that.
Which like
Well, let's talk about. Well, no, let's talk about that so we can then talk about the movie.
Right.
This is not the midnight comedy hour, guys. Just because the movie starts tanking like crazy doesn't mean that we're about to do One Night at the Apollo here. All right, we'll save that for your stand-up.
Look, the only kind of person who would like not have the social knowledge to or social like temerity to scream out in the middle of a movie is the kind of person who's going to have terrible jokes. So maybe just don't heckle a movie unless it's like a riff track screening or something like that. I don't know.
Definitely not a P&I. That's midnight status.
Yeah, some of us are actually there to work and pay attention. Even if the movie is really, really bad, and this one is really bad. I felt like his performance was like basically Mr. Peanut Butter from BoJack Horseman, but like caught in the middle of a detective noir. And it just sort of makes no sense. They want it to be this like Inherent Vice, Long Goodbye kind of stoner comedy detective thing. Yeah, Beach Bum may be more modern comparison, but it just never really makes sense. The whole mystery behind it, it constantly feels like the mystery is passing him by because he'll like come to a conclusion, then somebody has to be like, "No, you idiot! This is what actually happened," which is not a cinematic way to find out about the story.
Yeah, and he's not goofy enough for it to be that funny every time that it's happening to him. Yeah. It's like it's a frequency off of what it should be. This is a person singing in front of a lot of people, and no one's telling him. He's so confident, but he's a pitch off.
Yeah.
And he's doing these jokes, and no one's laughing at what should be a theater full of laughter to fill in his little like tantrum that he's throwing. Mm-hmm. It's just off, but it's almost amusing to see somebody continue to try to hit the punchline. That's and no one's getting it.
The thing that ultimately is the most entertaining element of Poolman is how committed everybody is to this goofy movie. I mean, the actors are trying. There is just kind of like, as you mentioned, it's off speed. It's not hitting the right pitch. It's just kind of not working. I'm not against the idea of like 5 revisions to the screenplay saving this thing, but whatever they shot was just a complete like misfire, just a miscalculation.
2 of the best people in this would be Danny DeVito and what's her name?
Annette Bening.
They have some really good back and forth between each other. Mm-hmm. Benning's got some really good delivery. All of that is coming from them. you can tell that the script just left him out there to die, because there is a moment where you're following Danny DeVito, who's the cameraman for the doc that he's helping to film for his son. And
Yeah.
there's a moment where they do a bit with him, and it's just like, no one told him what to do there. He is clearly ad-libbing with the camera prop that they gave him. It's pretty bad, bro. They thought that they could make a movie off vibes. No,
Yeah,
sir.
really.
I think the main reason you and I saw this, as we're being asked about distribution, is that we just wanted to make sure we saw this disaster before it gets cut.
Exactly. Like, I don't think this film has distribution. Like, it probably will get it at some point as a curiosity.
It almost didn't get distributed over there. The projector broke.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. But like, as you mentioned, whatever version ultimately comes out, I would not be surprised to see it drastically recut, because this one
It has
is
to.
a bit of a disaster.
Just go watch Chinatown. People said that this was ripping off Chinatown. No, the movie literally shows you
Yeah.
him copying Chinatown. They play Chinatown. Bro, no. 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 It's way worse than you think it
It's like
is.
one of those times where you think somebody's going to get to the joke first, so you want to say it, but then you're just calling yourself out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Poolman.
All right.
One
so
of my
we'll
favorite
go...
experiences of the best.
Yeah. I mean, look, there was nothing better to do in that time slot, right?
Oh, there was a lot of better things to do, but we were on a mission.
Yeah. Let's go from the worst film directed by an actor that we saw at TIFF to probably the best film directed
Surprising.
by an actor that
Yeah.
we saw at TIFF. I was hopeful, but I think my expectations were surpassed with Anna Kendrick's debut, Woman of the Hour, a chilling and also kind of like slyly funny look at the story of Rodney Alcala, I believe it is, the serial killer who once appeared on The Dating Game, a crazy true story. And it has this very interesting balance of both kind of showing you almost in like a Zodiac type of fashion the way that this, serial killer was preying on women in the like Los Angeles area, and also this like this interwoven bit of the like strange creation of The Dating Game and the kind of like misogyny that is sort of acceptable and produced for a wide audience, that Anna Kendrick's character finds herself in the middle of. She kind of delivers this a bit of like anachronistic performance. Like, she feels like a bit of a modern woman, not necessarily somebody from the time period that this film is shown in, but like,
You don't think they thought for themselves back then, Zachary?
the way that she
Her quippiness.
her quippiness, there we go, thank you for
Yeah.
helping me there, it is maybe a little bit more modern, but I think it serves as sort of like an interesting kind of like commentary and kind of like almost tension relief in this otherwise very, very tense,
Yeah.
often upsetting film. So to me, I know some people brushed up against that. I thought that actually made it better. I thought it really worked. I thought her direction was really solid here. Like,
Direction
there's
was pretty good.
yeah, like there's a clear vision, and like she does this thing where she kind of will often obfuscate certain details so that you are left in suspense. And I just think that particularly the non-linear way it's assembled really just ended up being this very chilling thing where you don't kind of know where it's gonna go. I was really kind of taken with this one. Netflix apparently was too. They shelled out $11 million for it. I feel like that's a pretty decent home for it.
That's a great home for it. I know a lot of people like saying, "Oh, it feels Netflixy." I don't think we know what that means anymore.
Netflix is everything.
Netflix is everything. So if by Netflixy you mean a movie that you can enjoy at home, I think this would fall on that more than something that's derivative. Because even in its most cliche points, it's never boring. It's never losing its tension. And like you said, the one thing that I would push back on it is the fact that because it is a true story, I feel the Anna Kendrick bits when she's in The Dating Game, they would have cut to commercial. So it's like she is keeping parts of it that I don't know if that's what that character did during that time.
Right.
But the way that it's trying to mix in this, what would be a true crime thriller, and changing some of the stuff and making it, a movie to sell. I think it justifies it because of the way that you're able to get inside of her head, because she is also someone who's not just going to The Dating Game. She wants to be an actress. And in wanting to be an actress, you're seeing the ins and outs of what she has to do to audition already.
Yeah.
And I kind of like it, dude. She
Yeah.
is showcasing how an actress auditioning is a woman dating. And there is a line that is said by the hairdresser, the makeup people to
Mhm.
her about what really is behind every question. And I thought that was one of the best lines that was delivered at the festival.
Yeah. Yeah. There are certainly like very standout moments that are hard to forget from Women of the
Good
Hour.
performances. That dude was creepy. Vincent D'Onofrio Jr. over there.
All right, let's move on to some of the films that first premiered at the Cannes Film Festival. We didn't get to catch Anatomy of a Fall or Zone of Interest. Both of
But we
those
will.
films, I think, are going to be at our respective film festivals, so we're excited to watch those later. I did get to catch Fallen Leaves before I headed to Toronto. This film is going to be Finland's submission for the best international film. I thought it was like mostly charming, a very slight kind of bone dry romantic comedy, social satire, I guess if you want to call that. It's just like, yeah, like it's decent. It's like not unentertaining, but it's very. I didn't really take much away from it. I didn't find it to be like so hilarious or whatever that it stood out to me. I don't know. There were some people who laughed very big at certain moments, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just not smart enough for the humor of this film. I thought it was just all right. What I liked a lot more was How to Have Sex from Molly Manning Walker, a film about a group of British teenage girls who go on a holiday to do a lot of drinking, clubbing, and hopefully hooking up. And what turns from kind of like a fun weekend out becomes something a bit darker. I thought it was really interestingly assembled. And I really also love the way that it finds sort of like the grimy underbelly of the party scene. I think the party scene is just sort of like a really interesting area to set your story. And I think it's something that a lot of people can relate to, even if they haven't necessarily experienced something quite like this. But you know, it feels very true in its depiction of young people, and also the like sort of surprising ways that people will reveal themselves. I like this one quite a bit. I think it's a pretty pretty like raw look at the you know, sort of ugly situations that young women sometimes find themselves in between. And like, even though it is kind of harrowing, it's got this energy to it that is pretty enticing. So I liked it a lot. I particularly liked Mia McKenna Bruce in the lead role. I thought she was just like very, very watchable. I think Amanda and Caitlin were calling her mini Florence Pugh. She's really good.
That's high praise. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to this one.
Definitely. One that I know you responded to was the latest from
incredible
Hiro Koreeda, Monster. This is a really interesting kind of Rashomonic story of a young boy who comes home from school with some injuries, and what happens as his mother tries to get to the bottom of what's going on. I think it's really cool in the way that it's structured, in that as it sort of goes back and tries and shows you more details, it kind of uncovers new layers to what's going on, and it keeps sort of like subverting what you believe is going on. What did you respond to in Monster?
The structure, I think, added so much to it, because you get to see different perspectives and how that leads to the misconceptions that certain people would have. Sakura Ando, who plays the mom in that first act of it,
incredible. She's also in Shoplifters, so they've worked together before.
Shoplifters, Love Exposure. Like, she's had some really good ones under her belt, but man, she commanded that scene. I had to like we got to see this at home through screener links, but that her performance was one of the main reasons why I would have wanted to have seen it at a theater. But even getting this, they only had the phone number, so we had to reverse engineer the phone number of the press contact to then go through the LinkedIn, to then go through our emails to figure out who it was. So bless whoever sent it to us, because there was no way we were going to catch this in the fest. This, I believe, came out of Cannes, had like 2 showings at Toronto. I don't know what the release for this is going to be, but I highly recommend it, because this is another one kind of dealing with teachers and what a faculty has to deal with when
Yeah.
an accusation is made and what the best approach to it is. Like, do you go all out and punish, or do you reel back the punishment in order to be able to have more longevity for the faculty and what the parents would do if they rise up against you? I think there's a spoiler in where you categorize this because I've seen this at Con and at TIFF categorized in a certain way, and then it's categorized in a certain category in Chicago, and I think that kind of spoils the movie a little bit, especially with its final act. But then I've also seen some people come out of it and guess or ponder on whether the story goes that way, and I'm like, it very much clearly goes that way. And I think leaving it as a subtle aspect to it is the whole point of the movie. Incredible performances all around. I can't wait to rewatch it because, again, once you see everyone's perspective, you run the whole thing back and it's has a whole different meaning to it. Highly, highly recommend Monster, but I recommend all this man's movies, man.
Yeah.
Broker last year was a a last minute one that they also sent us the screener link to. So Corietta's team, we love you, we appreciate you, and you make fantastic movies.
Yeah, I mean, even in terms of a Koreeda movie, I think this one feels a bit different in terms of its structure. Like
A little, yeah.
yeah, like there's a little bit more of like a suspense aspect to this one than I think we normally get from him.
It was very much welcomed.
Yeah, I mean, it really works. So I definitely wholeheartedly recommend Monster as well. It won't be Japan's submission to the Oscars because Perfect Days is going to be, oddly enough. The latest.
I still don't get that, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is produced in and written by and starring Japanese people. So even though the director is German, I guess that makes sense. But maybe the thing that doesn't make sense about this is that each country can only submit one movie. But
for sure,
that's
right?
a whole other.
Nolan's
discussion.
British.
Right.
I think Oppenheimer is American, but yeah, I just hear that it's a fantastic movie, dude. Hype me up.
Absolutely. Hirayama is a person who cleans toilets in Tokyo, and he spends his days driving around his van, listening to classic rock music on his cassette tapes, looking up at the shadows and leaves in the sky, and just sort of like appreciating his days. And I think it's just got this really kind of beautiful, meditative, quiet quality to it that I really responded to. There's people who might find a movie like this to be too boring, to be not fast moving enough, or a bit too like I don't know, reserved maybe, but there's just a quiet beauty to it in the way that I found Showing Up to be really beautiful, that I know we both found Patterson to be really beautiful. There's just like an undeniable quality to it that I think is so lovely. And it's one of those films where there's a scene somewhere along the way that kind of shifts your perspective on everything that you've seen, but it's got this like really tender quality to it, and I don't know, I'm really taken with it. I think for me it's probably going to be one of my favorite foreign films I see this year, so I'm
nice.
rooting for it to continue to be recognized.
I see it's got a speculative date of December something.
Ooh.
It's playing at Chicago, so if
Cool.
you are in the area, you can watch it with us. I'm highly anticipating this one.
Yeah, curious to see what you think of it. Let's talk about Robot Dreams.
Hey, first movie we got to see together.
Yeah, this one is from Pablo Berger. I think it also played at Cannes, which is why we're bringing it up here. It is a story about a dog living by himself in Manhattan who decides to order a robot to be his new friend and companion. It's got this really sweet quality to it. To me, it kind of feels like watching Bob's Burgers with the sound off, because it's got like a cutesiness to it. The way that it's animated feels a little bit similarly in that it is kind of grounded in reality. It's not very like wacky in terms of the animation style or anything like that. I found it to be a bit meandering, though. It ends up repeating itself a lot. And we talked about this when we saw it together, but like there's so many fantasy sequences, and yeah, like it is called Robot Dreams, but I still feel like they could have cut some of it. I like a lot of this movie, and it is like so lovely. Like
It's cute.
it's undeniably sweet. But I don't know, I did get a little bit tired of it by the end.
Yeah, there is that like the beginning of the second act where you're realizing how much of it is going to be these visions to a degree.
Yeah.
And we came out of it going like, I mean, we can't like we're complaining about it, but at the same time we don't want to sound like we're complaining about Oppenheimer being about
Right.
Oppenheimer. But there's like so much of it that it's not so much that the dreams don't add to it, it's just that the dreams are the same dreams.
Hmm.
But I guess that's kind of what happens when it's almost a relationship rom-com that's happening between these two. By the end of it, though, I found the ending to be beautiful. We
Yeah.
connected it to being like another movie, but look, I think it's adorable in every sense of it. There are some really interesting animated sequences that happen. I really like the snowman bowling bit. There's a lot of cute moments. The soundtrack that they overuse a lot, but I mean, it's a good song that they use in it. And I think a lot of people are really going to vibe with this. It's being released by Neon, so
Yeah.
there's a chance that if you don't get in a theater next year, it'll be on Hulu.
Definitely. All right, let's move into some films that are coming from like emerging directors, first or second time directors that we either had our eye on or are going to keep our eye on. The first one I want to spotlight is Backspot. This one comes from D.W. Patterson, and they're a really interesting director, partially because they also did all of the music for this film. They wrote the
Oh, that's
score,
cool.
and I believe were renowned as a DJ before they moved into filmmaking. But this is a movie that's been through the TIFF labs, I believe. There was a short film that also starred Devery Jacobs, and now it's a feature. Devery you may recognize from her work in Reservation Dogs on FX.
That's
She's
right.
excellent here, playing the role of a cheerleader who gets the opportunity to cheer with an all-star squad alongside her girlfriend and the complications that evolve from that. The way that the plot is described and the photo that they use to showcase the movie, I don't know why, but it just sort of brought like Whiplash or The Novice to mind. And I don't know if it is that movie. It's not necessarily like a movie about like sacrificing your happiness to achieve greatness. It is more a movie about like the ups and downs of competition and of being an athlete. It is more akin to like a sports movie than it is one of those films about like achieving greatness at all costs. And as a sports movie, it is pretty engaging. There's some sequences that are really beautifully shot. They do a lot of like GoPro footage and this like interesting kind of shaky extreme close-up thing to depict her in her panic attack anxiety moments. All those things really kind of make the film feel very alive. I don't know if I fully got her arc, but I did really enjoy my experience with it. Like, it's not necessarily one of the best films that I saw, but it is like one of the one of the most exciting films I saw in Toronto.
Got this one on my watch list. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to it.
Another movie that I want to mention is Daddio. This one is written and directed by Christy Hall. Her first film. She is has more of a background as a playwright, which makes a lot of sense considering this film is about a woman taking a cab home from the airport from JFK, driving across New York and engaging in a long conversation with her cabbie. The woman's played by Dakota Johnson, the cabbie played by Sean Penn, who's had a lot of interesting things to say about AI recently. All that aside, it ends up just being this great showcase for Dakota and Sean Penn to go back and forth in this very stagey way, this very writerly dialogue that at times feels very on the nose, but also has within it like a lot of really smart smart perceptions and smart like breakdowns of stuff. Like, it is really engaging and feels very real. It feels kind of incisive about how people are and I don't know, there's like a humanity to it that's really hard to deny. Like, Sean Penn might be the most eloquent cab driver you've ever seen, but at the same time, like, he's just a really like dynamic performer, and I think their energy opposite one another does a lot for this film. I don't know, it's an interesting experiment. I think it maybe works a little bit better than a film like Locke, which almost feels like it's trying to time
Mm-hmm.
one arm behind its back. This it makes sense to me, and there's like a clarity in terms of its focus here. I don't know if it's like the most breathtaking film or anything I saw, but it is a really strongly acted film that has a pretty interesting perspective. So, particularly if you like Dakota or Sean Penn, I'd put this one on your watch list.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Let's talk about Dream Scenario. This is one of the ones that I think you are most looking forward to because it comes from Christopher Borgley, who
My boy.
recently popped onto a lot of people's radar because of Sick of Myself, which a lot of people really liked. I caught that one before I headed to Toronto to properly prepare myself to dive into the world of Nick Cage, who becomes a overnight celebrity after appearing in every person on Earth's dream. It's a really fascinating idea. It feels kind of Charlie Kaufman-esque. It definitely has like shades of adaptation as well as Synecdoche, New York in it. I think it is a wildly inventive and quite often quite hysterical sort of existential comedy in some ways. It's also shot really interestingly in this sort of like muted film stock. Nick Cage is quite good in it as well. There's a lot of actors I like who show up and have interesting roles, from Michael Cera to Dylan Galula and Tim Meadows. To me, this is like one of the most unique films that we caught at Toronto. I was just consistently taken with how imaginative it was. Art, what did you think about Dream Scenario?
I agree with you that at its worst, it really is adaptation. His meme movie that just came out last year, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent,
Mm-hmm.
it's like all those movies yet again into a blender, some funny different sequences, but it does feel like they're Nick Caging him again. They are recognizing who he is and almost taking that idea of when he went viral because of all of his, spaz out scenes that he had in his movies. Everybody knew him for this one thing, and they're kind of trying to play on that. What do you do when the whole world sees you as something? Is the judgments of the court of public opinion, does that supersede everything else, right?
Yeah.
Including his tenure. This would be another teacher movie where they're dealing with how everybody, all the student body feels about them. That set is just funny, dude. Like,
Yeah.
this is him performing and giving you some of the most memorable quotes you're gonna get from Nick Cage. If you've loved what he's done in the past, he continues doing it here. There's this one moment where someone takes a picture of him, and his reaction to that, I've been quoting the entire time since we've seen it. There is a scene on a couch. Just hilarious.
Yeah.
There are cliche fart jokes that they do in this movie, and they work. There's imagery in this movie, especially dealing with the dreams, with how they'll take the setting in the real world to then the setting in the dream world and how they play along with that. I think is really cool. The commentary is a little cheeky. I think this is a very online movie. You can tell that the director, especially in the Q&A, what's his name, would say something about how he did a scene. Mm-hmm. Nick Cage, and it very much sounded like the director would be like, "Oh yeah," and then just add this. He did the tin 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 tin. Like it sounded like he was just adding a lot of those moments to it, and he definitely wanted to be the center of the bit. Which, when you direct a movie like Sick of Myself, I guess that is something that is really close to heart for you. But he's a talented little bugger, is what I'll give to him.
Yeah.
And I think you see that a lot in this movie. There are like callbacks to podcasters in this movie that I found really corny, but at the same time, it leads to him being able to have a sequence dealing with dream ads. It's so funny at times.
Yeah.
The performances are great. The imagery is fantastic. I would definitely put this on your radar. I would just definitely put this on your radar, just in general.
Yeah. I mean, it's like sometimes you want film to be able to take you to like a place that you hadn't thought of going, and this is one of those films that really like just takes you some very interesting places, some very funny places. Can't wait for this one to come out.
It's a dumber Michel Gondry movie.
Yeah,
since you brought him up, it just is.
Yeah. Let's talk about Fingernails, keeping in that similar mode. This is the latest from director Christos Nikou, whose last film Apples I liked quite a bit. This one is his English language debut, and it has a great cast, including Jesse Buckley, Riz Ahmed, and Jeremy Allen White. It takes place in a world in which a test has been developed that can compare people's fingernails to determine whether or not they are compatible to be in a long-term relationship.
No, it makes sense.
And yeah, and it is another film that is like very inventive. It creates a whole world, and when it is really focused on like the quirks of this alternate sort of society and like the eccentricities of that, I thought it was really funny. I think it does ultimately get a bit repetitive in pressing on those notes, and I kind of felt like you got where it was going sometimes before it ultimately got there, which for a movie like this, for a movie that takes you to a completely alternate reality, you don't want to then know everything that's going to happen, right? And there are a lot of really funny moments. I laughed a lot. There's also a lot of things that like made me squirm in my seat that I was not ready for. Seeing this with an audience was pretty fun because of all the reactions to it, because it is like, it's a sweet movie, it's a romantic movie, it's kind of a horrifying movie too, but ultimately I just think that it overstayed its welcome because of the repetitive nature. Particularly, like there are 2 or 3 scenes towards the end that I felt like are completely unnecessary. Like, we get the point that the ending's making, and then it continues to make it for a couple other scenes. I think there's like a really, I hate this type of criticism, but I think there's a really great 90 something minute movie in there, and unfortunately it's almost 2 hours long.
Damn.
Yeah, still think it's worth watching, still think that you'll find some redeeming aspects to it, though I don't want to completely warn you off of it, Art.
Yeah, it's gonna be on Apple.
Yeah. One that I did try to warn you off of, but you still caught it, is Mother Couch.
No, I caught it before you. I didn't think you had it on your radar. Yeah, I was at the premiere for this. And yeah. I guess I'm not detracting anything you're about to say.
Yeah.
Because I would not recommend it to anybody. But I think there's something in there. It wasn't the worst thing.
Sure. This one comes from Nicholas Larson, who I believe is a big name in commercials.
Somewhere else.
I think it is his feature debut, an adaptation of a book. It is about these estranged children who are brought together by their mother, who goes to a furniture outlet and sits on a couch and refuses to get up. I think this movie is trying to sort of evoke the feelings of those anxiety scenes in Punch Drunk Love, where there's lots of overlapping dialogue and people demanding things from the protagonist, and there's this kind of percussive xylophone music that swells and sort of drowns out some of the dialogue too. So the protagonist and the audience are both overwhelmed by everything that's happening, but I just think it's kind of not really in service of as much as Punch Drunk Love. I think the metaphors in this one are like really literal, and like eventually it arrives at a place where it does sort of come together. But by the time it got there, I was just all the way out on this movie. To me, it's Beau is Afraid, but like empty. You know, it's similarly assaultive, but it doesn't really have much there. I am definitely far more negative on this movie than most people. I know some people who came out positive on it. You came out mildly positive on it, right?
I came out mildly interested because there's something in there with the way that it jumps around between it feeling like characters who are grounded. There's a whole back and forth between what's his name, Obi-Wan's Ewan McGregor's character, who your girl Lake Bell plays his wife, but she's always taking care of the kids, and as much as he wants to not be there as a dad, he never acknowledges that she's there with the kids. It's always, yeah, but why are you with the kids and this other guy from the soccer team? And there's this one moment where like the guy's there, but the guy's daughter isn't. So you're dealing with grounded characters, and even I would say some of the siblings are grounded. And then our girl here, bro, I don't know what movie she was in. She plays the daughter of the guy who runs the furniture store.
Mm-hmm. Taylor Russell.
She's in Big Fish too, bro. Yeah. I don't know what she's doing over here. She is speaking in parables. She is speaking to this man like she knows something that he doesn't. And like you said, eventually what feels like a grounded movie shot in a very quirky way starts getting into like magical realism, kind of. Maybe. Is it all in his head? I think there's a lot of interesting parts in this movie, but you have to be prepared for the pacing that it's going for. I will say, looking at Russell, she's got a very young face. Mm-hmm. We know how old she is.
Yeah.
But there was a dude sitting next to me who clocked out and was ready to leave. Because there was a sequence between her and McGregor. and
Yeah.
he just could not handle that McGregor was sitting with a minor. No one told him, nah, bro, she's in her 20s. He thought, dude, picture that scene. And this
Yeah.
guy squirming next to me, knowing what happens in that scene. He thought he was watching something that he was ready to protest.
Yeah.
Little
I
did he
mean,
realize it's just because it's slow.
it is like an awkward enough age gap that I thought it was strange to not even
It's
address
still
it.
awkward.
Yeah.
But this guy thought she was like 15.
Yeah. I mean, she does have this really like quirky, peculiar performance. She like has this lisp, and I really liked it, but it also was kind of at odds with everything else in the movie.
Yeah.
But I honestly, I prefer the movie that Taylor Russell is in to the movie that everybody else was in.
For sure. I just want to know why that guy, the soccer dad, was there if the little girl wasn't there. I wanted more back and forth with him and like that. But hey, I think that there's going to be a cult audience for this in two ways. Those who really love it, and then I think there's going to be a cult audience of haters.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I want you to start that club.
For sure. I'll be first in line. All right, let's talk about Royal Hotel. This was on our radar because it's the latest film from Kitty Green, who made a really great film, also with Julia Garner, called The Assistant, but also did casting John Bonet over on Netflix. This latest one sees Julia Garner and Jessica Harwick as were they Americans or just pretending to be Canadian? That's what I think.
They were Americans, and while Kitty Green was traveling,
Yeah.
her friend used to always say, "Just say Canadians," because
There you
people look down on they look down on Americans, but
Yeah.
they find Canadians to be pleasant.
Yeah, so these Canadian girls traveling through Australia who, in order when they go broke, in order to get some money to go home or continue their travels, pick up shifts at a out of the way bar in the Australian outback.
I don't even get that, bro.
and,
If I want to go to TIFF, guess where I'm getting a job at? And Toronto.
You see, it was the only one they could get though on such short notice.
Uber, bro. I don't know, man.
And then they end up subject to not so much microaggressions as we saw in The Assistant, but like outright aggressions. This is another film sort of about like the things that women in the workplace sometimes endure, except it feels a lot more threatening than it does in The Assistant. And I feel like her style, which is sort of like understated and a little like unspectacular, really works well when we're talking about what's the context of The Assistant. But it felt just too repetitive here for there not to be some kind of other shoe. Like I spent most of this movie wondering if there was kind of gonna be some sort of third act Black Mirror-esque twist, because it sort of feels like there needs to be another thing.
Yes.
Right? And it just sort of stays in one tone throughout.
For sure. I think knowing that is very important. I've heard Kitty Green talk about The Assistant a lot, so I was prepped. I've seen a lot of people who fall a little bit more negative on it, and I understand y'all completely. It does make complete sense. So I'm telling you to pitch this movie for you so that you can enjoy it. It's exactly, what Zach is saying. I heard someone call it intention the movie. That is what this is riding on. It's how you react to certain things and what that ends up, the chain reaction to it, what it catapults to. Because of that, I enjoyed it for what it was. I was frustrated with it for what it was, but I went along for the ride with it. I think it's shot very well, especially because a lot of it takes place at this bar that they're working at the hotel, and the way that they're just able to play with that space is really good. Then they open it up for some sequences in the desert. I thought the cast of characters were pretty good as well. And the way that you'll have moments where you're siding with one character and you see what that causes, and they may be questioned about, should that have been the way that you went about it? While still being a movie that everyone sitting in the theater is like, why did y'all even go to begin with?
Yeah. I don't know. Like there's certain sequences that I think really work, and I was with it for a little while, but I did grow a bit tired by the end.
Yeah. I'm surprised I didn't end up hating it. I think it's a good thriller if you know that it's just playing with that sense of, if you believe the character should run away, this ain't the movie for you.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about Seagrass, which you were putting on my radar. Tell me about it.
First of all, this was a profound move from the PR team to just be like, hey, 2 days till Toronto, here is the link, and they sent it to everybody. That is how you should do it, especially when you have a tiny movie like this, because it gets on people's radar, and it ended up winning a TIFF award. This is about a couple who goes to what I would say is a resort where they're going through therapy. So you're seeing a lot of couples kind of like interact with each other because they're a part of that, trying to fix their marriages. But a lot of them come with kids, and so the kids are also interacting with each other in a place that's a vacation, but also kind of like a not just a resort, but a last resort for their families, their parents that they don't realize, and they're going through a lot of stuff as well. Um, uh, Decent movie. Once you watch it, I'd be interested to talk more with you about it
Yeah.
because of the dynamic that both of the groups are going for. It was also one of the early movies. We had just brought up the Royal Hotel, where I recognize the character, but they're not on the IMDb. Sarah Gadon is in it, and I'm like, no, that's Sarah Gadon, and she wasn't
Right,
on the
right.
IMDb. I was like, there's no way they cloned her, bro. She gives a really good performance as a wife who doesn't want to be a mother, giving advice to a mother who I don't want to spoil it, but to a mother who has her own kids and she's kind of getting advice from somebody else about how to approach it. But
Cool.
no, I think it's got really solid performances all around, and this is the big definition. I think when we go to Sundance, when we go to South by, there's a couple of movies where we go, nah, this feels like a true independent movie. At South by, I'm thinking of the one where the guy has OCD.
Oh, Puro, yeah.
This is that of this fest. It's got that energy. It
Cool.
feels like a full on production that's grassroots. I'm looking forward to seeing. I'm rooting for Seagrass. I
Awesome.
hope it's able to play at other places.
Nice. All right, let's talk about one more film in this section. The latest from Minhal Baig, who I saw her debut, Hala, back at Sundance in 2019. This latest film is called We Grown Now. It is a story that takes place in the Cabrini Green Public Housing Complex in 1992. So it's set in Chicago, the city that you're from, that Minhal is apparently from as well. And it follows two boys growing up, sort of dealing with the joys of youth and the hardships of their surroundings. And it is sort of like a dedication to the places that we grow from, right? The places that we either develop in or grow out of or move on from, and the communities and places that even if the physical locations disappear, there's something that is like uh immortal about a place. And there are a lot of really there's a lot of really like pretty compositions in this film. I think it's beautifully shot, particularly in the way that it sort of tries to get at the wonder of youth. Like they do this thing where they jump on old mattresses in the movie, and all those shots are really good. There's a moment where they stand on their heads, and I think the camera move is like awesome in that moment. It's a very like emotional and heartfelt movie. I did find it to be like maybe bordering on patronizing, but
How
like
so?
just in that like the ways that it tries to depict, or the ways that it tries to sort of like do certain uplifting moments. There's a whole thing where they the two boys shout together that I feel like I've seen in other films. Um, you also, I think, compared it to Last Black Man in San Francisco, and it definitely is sort of borrowing the like energy of that Emile Mosseri score in certain sequences. I still think there is like something really really like, I don't know, emotive and touching about this film, even if it doesn't all work for me.
Yeah, it's two kids who grew up and are kind of drifting apart,
Yeah.
and I think that could work in any setting. It's kind of cosplaying Cabrini. Look, as someone from Chicago, I think you can notice a lot of the places kind of being used as backdrops
Mm-hmm.
for what would be the remaining buildings that they have there. But everything's blocked out in those buildings, and they can't take off the what's it called, the boards that are on the
Yeah,
windows.
you can't
So
literally shoot in Cabrini Green, so
yeah, well, they shot in Cabrini Green in the same location where they shot Candyman.
yeah.
But because all of those houses are boarded up, it looks like they're in the Cabrini Green lot for the leftover row houses.
Mm-hmm.
When in reality, take In the Heights, everyone's coming out their windows. If they're not coming out their windows, you're not filming in the Heights.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't
Man, those
feel
things
as
are
lived in.
a lot of what's doing the work, and shout out to the sound team. It's the sound design. The sound design is building up the hallways. The sound design is building up when they're walking and playing outside. I think they do some good CGI aerial shots. You'll have a building that's too new and wasn't in the 90s in the background, but for the most part, I think for people who are not from Chicago, it'll work. But being from Chicago, you know that those kids already knew the elevator didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
You know that those kids wouldn't be questioning a raid. They would have been used to it. And I think that it kind of, in you saying that it patronizes how the kids were yelling out and they would have been shushed in those buildings, I think it kind of is just using Cabrini as a setting that they know would trend. And it feels like it's coming from people who heard a lot about Cabrini from secondhand sources, which obviously that would be most people, when I think you would have a lot of talent that grew up in those places or were more connected that would show you a little bit more of the nuances of what would have happened there. And I feel that it doesn't feel too much like two kids who grew up in Cabrini. It feels like two kids who they wanted to make a story on and then almost suburbanized them because they don't interact or feel foreign to a lot of the turmoil that happened there. And I don't think that that's... We kind of talked about in Haunted Mansion, where instead of making Lakeith a quirky lead character who can be a father figure, they also stripped all of his quirkiness to make him kind of like a cliche.
Yeah.
They cliched the kids a bit. Just a bit. And I feel like there should have been a little bit more depth with them. But I do compare it to... and I've seen a lot of people compare it to Black Man, Last Black Man in San Francisco, in the sense that you have these two friends who are kind of growing apart from each other as they grow apart from their location and how that brings people in. The Last Black Man in San Francisco, new San Francisco. This feels like it's coming from someone who don't even know O Block right now. So I'll just put it there. I'm waiting for the next movie that covers it a little bit deeper. This could have been a story about two boys, and it could have taken place anywhere. But Cabrini really helps it.
Yeah.
Lowrell, that man needs more dramatic roles because he does very little in this, and I think that was one of the best performances. I think they have one of the best scenes when talking to their kid about keeping on. So it's not a bad movie in any way, shape, or form. I just think that they could have used this setting a little bit more, and it felt like it was just covering at its basis for people who have just heard of Cabrini Green and all of the bad things that have happened, and they're like, if we do it through a kid's eyes, all of that bad will disappear. When it should be, all of that bad gets consolidated to their point of view instead of it just vanishing. Yeah. But it's still a decent movie. I'm not going to hate on it. It is opening the Chicago Fest, and you can check it out there at the beautiful Music Box Theater.
Nice. All right, let's go lightning round through some documentaries and other films that slipped through the cracks. Let's start with Boil Alert. Art, tell me a little about it.
It is a story about indigenous people in Canada who have no water, so they are like literally dropping off water to people, and it's one of those where you're like, yeah, that's depressing. Yeah. And it's following a woman as she is trying to figure out not just how to get water to people, but then what do they do with all the plastic when nobody's helping them there. So the solution ends up being even more of a problem when you end up with pollution.
How about The World Is Family?
This is a director who we reached out to, and he gave us the link himself. I always love when the director's just hitting you with their own like private account, and I'm like, oh, I appreciate this. And they're like, you got like 3 days because I'm gonna switch the password. I'm like, okay. It is about his family who was like this, super connected to Mahatma Gandhi. Like it turns out that they were doing revolutions together, and it's him kind of looking back at his family and the pictures and the stories that they have. But at the end of it all, it's how much of those values that they were fighting for have kind of changed now. And he goes to these schools and he's talking to these kids who are blaming the Muslims and they're blaming the Hindus, and it's this back and forth of like, was the lesson really learned? And I think it was a really good way to dissect the politics in India through a person who's a descendant of really big political figures.
Nice. How about Silver Dollar Road?
I believe this is going to be coming out to Prime, if I'm not mistaken.
Nice.
It follows a family who has owned really good land, and the moment that land becomes sought out, they start throwing the whole book at them. Because I don't know what the premise of the trailer is going to be, but through generations of them trying to maintain this land, they've had to fight for it legally, while they've been punished in every way, shape, or form, as the government tries to like illegally take it away from them, or other people, construction companies try to take it away from them because they're at a prime real estate where they're close to what could be resorts, what could be condominiums, and they refuse to sell their land, and they try everything to get it away from them. To me, when we fight wars, that's for land. So we're going through a war every day if it's this fighting that we do in this country for property, for land, and showcasing that even if you have all the rights to it, it's sometimes your word is against somebody else's. And yeah, it's a pretty sad documentary that still leaves you with them continuing to fight for it.
Yeah, I was curious about this one since it's from Raoul Peck, who obviously did the excellent "I Am Not Your Negro"
Yep.
documentary on James Baldwin. So, glad to see that that one was interesting as
Yeah.
well.
It's a rough watch.
How about What We See?
Two sisters post pandemic or during the pandemic who are talking to each other about a lot of the abuse that they went through growing up, and then realizing that they have now rippled that down and may have had the lasting effects that have affected their children, and them trying to make a change.
Nice.
And it's all done through like Skype calls. Very few
Oh,
times do they meet with each other, but it's like two sisters uh, talking to each other. So it's
hmm.
it's like a vlog sisters with them going through therapy and realizing things that they had gone through. Also, kind of talking about how a lot of their customs were already being taken away, and COVID they felt was a convenient way to stop them from gathering to also get rid of a lot of the customs that they were doing.
Hmm. Interesting, interesting. All right, let's talk about Flipside a little bit because this is one of the documentaries that I was seeing a lot of positive buzz about out of the festival. A movie that looks at some old records and cassette tapes. Takes place near me in New Jersey, so I'm definitely curious to catch up with it. My link is still active, so I'm probably going to catch that
Go for it,
as soon
bro.
as we're done recording. But tell me what I'm in for.
I added this spot, followed them on Instagram, made sure that we know where this is so that we could go visit it. It's a
Hell yeah.
dude who has made several documentaries and never finished them, right?
Hmm.
So in this documentary, he's looking to finish them all. It's him going back to the place that started a lot of his ventures in his creative space, which is this Flipside record store that has refused to update itself. You know,
Hmm.
they still do things by the book. They still do things with a calculator. Their inventory is not digitized at all. And it kind of shows you the creative journey of one dude who feels he was very stubborn by observing, excuse me, another dude whose business and creativity is also stunted because of how stubborn they are to upgrade their store. It's a very interesting documentary that makes you roll your eyes at the way that he's going about comparing his life and his father's life. And like I said, the person who ran the store where his first job was, it's got like a really cheesy ending, but that's also what makes it work so well. So if you're a creative person who's procrastinated on a lot of their projects, boy, is this the movie for you.
Nice. I'm very curious about that one. Uh, One that I think we both got a chance to watch is Copa 71. This is definitely high on our radar, partially because it's got some interesting producers attached in the Williams sisters, I believe Alex Morgan as well. And it tells the story of the unofficial 1971
Ooh.
Women's World Cup, a not event not sanctioned by FIFA that saw several of the world's best women's teams come to Mexico for a tournament years before the first officially recognized Women's World Cup. I thought it was a pretty compelling retelling of the story. I kind of wish it maybe dove into some more of the specifics in terms of the obstacles they faced. It was very much like summarizing people's viewpoints, whereas I kind of wanted like to actually hear the letters and stuff like that.
Mm.
But it's a really incredible story, and particularly that it was so kind of erased from the record is fascinating. What did you think about Copa 71?
I don't know if you ever saw the Hurricanes, the female football one from South by,
I
where
remember
they
that,
get
but
a,
no, yeah.
yeah, they get a lot of like the remaining players. This was like that to the degree that they have the record for the most people who were at an event. Like it rivals the World Cups that they have now. I also thought it was crazy that they were kind of going back on the copyright infringement on like who's allowed to use World Cup, you know, like just the
Right.
beginnings of what becomes this behemoth event. And then just the intricacies of how they face each other and, you know, without spoiling what happens in this real life event, how because it took place in Mexico City, there was a sway. But
Hmm.
then the sway that it went to, those players also were like, "Nah, you're screwing us over." So I thought they did a really good job at getting into the minds of the players and how they were feeling during that time, and it made you feel like, "Oh, okay, you're following this tourney in real time with a profound amount of footage." To be honest with you, I thought it really put you into the flashbacks of those moments, and I'd be curious to see any follow ups to this. And I mean, they run a women's cup now, no?
Yeah, I mean,
Like there's that whole debacle that happened with the guy that they want fired because of the hugging, right?
exactly. Yeah, there was a Women's World Cup earlier this summer,
So this is gonna
and
be timed perfectly to a lot of yeah.
yeah,
But no, I thought
uh,
it was good.
yeah, very good. All right, the last thing we'll mention in our little doc section is a bit of a hybrid. This one is called "They Shot the Piano Player." And normally I'm a fan of things like this, just combining some documentary audio with animation, with some scripted elements that are voiced by Jeff Goldblum randomly. Jeff Goldblum plays the reporter trying to investigate the disappearance of this virtuosic Brazilian piano player, Tenorio Jr. And it's sort of like a dive into the history of the bossa nova music movement and how it sort of came to sweep up jazz and become the center of creativity for Latin American music for a little while. But it ultimately ends up as this sort of like weird blend that doesn't ever feel like one piece. I thought the animation was very dry and kind of unmoving. Like it has this weirdly slow pace to it that feels like watching it in slow motion, which did not help. Jeff Goldblum would sort of interject with these scripted bits. They would play like interview audio and then cut to Jeff Goldblum's character reacting, and it never felt like they were in the same room at the same time. And it just sort of like never flows. It never feels like it's meant to be. I thought that a lot of the interviews were extremely repetitive. Like you hear the story from one person, then you hear the exact same story from a second person, then you hear the exact same story from a third person. And while the story itself might be interesting, just tell it to me one time. I got it. This would have made a really interesting short film, but at the length it just does not justify its runtime.
I am looking forward to it at Chicago because I did skip it. So I will have a follow up to this very soon.
Yeah, let me know. All right. Going through some last ones here before we wrap up our TIFF recap, some of the films that slipped through the gaps. Let's talk a little bit about Andragogy. Is that how it's pronounced?
Yes, andragogy is one of the many, again, teacher goes viral or a big thing happens and things go all over the place. It is very rare that we say the compliments of this should be adapted into an American movie. There would be a lot of differences, but those nuances that are, pertain to the country, I think would be huge. It's a big language barrier that happens here. This teacher wants to get a promotion to become, I believe, a principal, but a viral video goes viral about her saying a phrase that can be perceived in two ways. It either means like enough or it means a female dog, right? Yeah. And obviously, because of the language, it can play on that word. I'm trying to think of what the English version would be, but that causes people to be split on it. And then it causes this ripple effect on, do you answer and put out a statement, or does that make things worse? Will that affect the raise that she wants to get at the school? Her son is involved as an influencer. How does that affect him? And I thought that the way that it ripples on through the family was fantastic. I really like this one, and I would say compared to Teacher's Lounge, this is more consistent all the way up to the ending that I thought was really good, even though it doesn't hit that like strong 75% that the Teacher's Lounge was able to hit. But Andragogy is really up there for me. I would highly, highly recommend this one. And if they ever remake it, I think they could do some very clever things with it as well.
Interesting. All right, Andragogy, curious about that. Also curious about Evil Does Not Exist. I'm going to watch it when it gets to New York, but this is the latest from Ryosuke Hamaguchi, the director behind the wonderful film Drive My Car, as well as films like Wheel of Fortune and Fantasy and Passion, which is getting an American release soon. But his latest, I've heard, is a bit of a departure from what you're expecting if you're looking for the follow-up to Drive My Car.
Yeah, if you had the patience that people had for Drive My Car, I think you'll have the patience for this one as well. But boy, does it begin with a lot of just scenic shots or what would be a routine. It is about 25 minutes of that, Zach, before you get into the real premise of this movie, which is that a glamping company, that is when you glamorously camp, wants to set up camp here in this town where they really use the water. And because the way that they're setting it up and cutting corners leads to a lot more pollution than expected, it's the community trying to, persuade them, maybe we shouldn't do this. all that intro of setting up the routine of the land and how the people work there, if you got the patience for it, it's not one of those where it's just slow just to be slow. It does come back into play. But damn, you gotta wait a lot for that. But when it hits, Zach, it hits. So definitely keep this one on your radar.
Cool.
It's not better than Drive My Car. It somehow feels longer, even though it's an hour less. But I'm curious to know your thoughts on the ending of this. We're kind of split with it. We love the ending, but then are kind of questioning the ending. So I can't wait for you to see it at New York and to bring your thoughts back. It's also playing at Chicago. So if you were a fan of his previous movies, you definitely have to have this one on your radar.
Nice. Yeah, I'm curious to get into that with you once we both have seen it.
I'm curious to drink to this one, baby.
Yeah, I mean,
we missed it, but I wish I had it.
In a way, it's the meme movie of the festival. Finestkind, the latest from director Brian Helgeland. Kind of crazy considering some of the films this guy's done. You know, he did A Knight's Tale. He did 42. When you go to what he's written, he's even written better films like L.A. Confidential, Man on
Mystic.
Fire. Oh man, like he's a pretty acclaimed filmmaker, and this has gotta be one of the worst films in his filmography. Movie about two brothers who work in commercial fishing off the shores of Massachusetts. For the first hour or so of this movie, I thought it was kind of an interesting look at what life is like as a commercial fisherman, but I thought it was pretty plotless, and I was waiting for something to kick in. And then in the second half, the plot starts, and it's like, oh, please stop.
Chill.
I don't need any more. No more plot. It's one of the weirdest collisions of like family melodrama and like low key crime caper or something. I think it ends up being like a crime syndicate movie in a weird way, and it just never feels right. It just gets more and more ridiculous as it goes. It's one of those movies where you start out thinking it's a sincere drama, and by the end, you and everybody around you is laughing at lines that are supposed to be taken seriously. There's about a full minute of this movie where Tommy Lee Jones just makes whale sounds. For me, though, my favorite line is a repeated line, because the first times it comes up, somebody says, "Oh, you're born and you die, and it's the stuff that in between that matters." And then somebody brings it back up later.
This is the stuff.
Yeah, this is the stuff in between.
That sounds raw, dude.
Sure, man, it's super raw.
I would have picked this if over Poolman if this didn't have a secured date. This is coming to Paramount Plus, so I knew, I'm like, okay, I get to like just fully take shots every time. Yeah. I want y'all to make up a bingo card for me so that when I watch the movie, right?
Definitely take a shot every time Jenna Ortega does that with her hands. She just sort of like puts both her arms in the air watching boat sleeve. I don't know why that's her move, but they got to it several times.
Can't wait.
Jenna Ortega, I think a lot of people are interested in this movie because she's attached to it. And unfortunately, I feel like she's in the Jennifer Lawrence zone where they're trying to cast her above her age because she's so like confident and self-assured. But like, this is a character that easily should have been 5 to 8 years older than Jenna Ortega's actual age.
Damn.
Pretty bad misfire. One of those movies where you watch it and it's like, how did this get into TIFF?
But almost so bad it's good.
Yes, definitely almost so bad it's good. I had a better time at this one than Poolman, at least.
So. There you go. Yeah. All right. I'm excited for it for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah. Definitely set up some shots before it. All right, tell me about Woodland.
Yeah, we got a couple of indie dramas that we were able to catch last minute. Woodland would be one that's inspired by a book that's actually based off of a memoir of a woman who was an incident, a shooting that had happened somewhere during an attack, and it's about this woman who ends up going to live in the woods because she's kind of removing herself from society. I found this one to be really interesting, especially with the way that they were you have like shifting settings between her uprooting herself to go live in a cabin as opposed to when she was living in the city. All of the relationships that are now become kind of estranged to where she's going now. It's pretty much just one of those movies where she's looking for that breakthrough to be able to come back, because there's obviously a lot of things that trigger her anxiety. So I think the big standout for this movie is the performance from the lead. It also comes from Austria, which I believe can still have their own submission. I'm not sure what they've chosen, but I wouldn't say it's the strongest out of the Austrian movies or German language films that have been out there, but I think it is anchored by a pretty solid performance. It would be this following drama that we have here called Achilles that I did find to be very interesting because it's an Iranian movie that kind of also takes the director's look on how they've made movies in Iran and had to kind of hide them to the actor in the movie who's playing a director who had to let go of his movies and become a doctor because the government was like, "Nah, we don't like you being a documentarian filming all these things." Then he becomes a doctor, and they're like, "We don't like you doctoring the way you're doctoring either." The big premise of the movie is that the director herself witnessed somebody who tried to escape a prisoner, a political prisoner, and that spawned this movie where the documentarian turned doctor in helping this political prisoner that he finds in his quarters helps her escape, and it becomes this whole journey on him learning from her to re-become a documentarian regardless of all of the risks, as she's also kind of being freed in order to go back into becoming the political activist that she is. I think it's very interestingly shot because the director claimed that they shot the movie in secret because of what it's about, that she wrote it a month before the Iranian protests, which were obviously a massive uplift that happened, and how this movie plays against that would be really interesting. I don't know Iran's submission at this point. They claim they got funded without the government, but then I was reading some people on Letterboxd saying that she was funded by the government. I'm gonna tell you, Zach, that's a big drastic difference between how you look at the movie. But according to how they made it, I think it is a very profound movie about your talents as a filmmaker and mainly a creative in the backdrop of a country that is forcing you to not tell the truth. I would put that as a perfect double feature, as this being the narrative and then No Bears being the hybrid docu-narrative about filming with a lot of people kind of risking their lives and being a part of the project. So Achilles would be an interesting crime, drama, political thriller if you wanted to catch that.
Nice. I want to talk a little bit about Humanist, Vampire Seeking Consenting Suicidal Person, my favorite film title out of Toronto, and a pretty fun, interesting comedy as well. This one I thought sort of reminded me of that like Lars and the Real Girl era of indie comedies where there would be like this kind of ridiculous thing, but it was handled super seriously and kind of very dry, and there was like a real sort of like emotional vulnerability to them, even if it was sort of goofy on its surface. It's a fun take on the coming of age story, and I think it's like both very warm and whimsical. There's elements of it that even remind me of like an Amelie or something like that. I enjoyed it. It's definitely a little low key. It's not the most laugh out loud movie or the most profound original story, but it's a good time and a pretty interesting perspective on a kind of familiar-ish setup. So I would recommend it.
I would probably recommend it a half star more than you would. I really liked it. And shout out to the actress. If you click on her, she's been in some pretty good festival movies that we've been able to catch, from Falcon Lake, I think is what Caitlin was able to catch at
she
TIFF
liked
last
Falcon
year.
Lake a lot.
Yeah, and then the third one as well. That's been one that's on my watch list for a minute, but people really like her performance there. Hey, bro, I'm talking range. I didn't even recognize her with the bangs and the fangs. So shout out to her. I think the way that they balanced the, like you said, the seriousness with the idea of her being a vampire who doesn't want to kill is really interesting.
Yeah,
I liked the ending as well. Other people's mileage can be a little bit different, but I would recommend it if the title intrigues you. I think you'll really like it.
It delivers.
Yeah.
Another great title. I Do Not Come to You by Chance. This film,
and a killer premise, bro.
Yeah, about a Nigerian college graduate struggling to get a job who gets recruited by his uncle to help in his fraudulent email scams business. Everybody's gotten those like Nigerian prince emails. Well, these are the master manipulators behind them. This is kind of like the Wolf of Wall Street, except like the Wolf of Nigerian email scams, I guess.
That's high praise.
In its tone, like it's maybe not quite as rollicking and rowdy as like the Scorsese movie, but in its breakdown of it, there's some similarities. Maybe in terms of its scope, it's a little more similar to that Zoe Dutch movie that we like, Buffaloed. Yeah. Although that's not a reference that I think as many people get, so I'll put Wolf of Wall Street out there. I thought it was pretty solid, because of the way that these stories often go, and because the Wolf of Wall Street style movie is kind of becoming an archetype. Like, I think you understand what's going to happen in terms of the general rise and fall trajectory that these stories get. It's not the most unpredictable movie, but I think it's really solidly acted. I think the performances are particularly good. I don't know if this is the guy. No, that's the main dude, Blossom. But they don't have him credited here on Letterboxd. But the guy on the left in this photo is so charming, just as this criminal underlord who goes by Cash Money. It's just so fun. There's a lot of really funny bits in the film, and it's got a very, very good ending as well. So yeah, I definitely recommend this film coming out of Nigeria.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Let's talk about Close to You, which is, as far as I know, Elliot Page's first leading
Feature.
role in a film post-transition.
And
it's also a film that was highly improvised, intriguingly.
Yeah, so that was the thing that I didn't know until afterwards. The director approaches all of his films in that manner. And I was like, okay, I can see why some scenes meandered a little bit, but then it kind of elevates a bunch of other scenes where it really just is the raw interactions that they're having when they go back home. I believe it's been like 4 or something years that Elliot hasn't returned, or her character Sam hasn't returned to their quaint town because they've moved to Toronto. So them moving back is something that's like really nerve-wracking for them. But when they get there, I thought that all of the cliche interactions, right, of the dramatic points where you're going to have someone who isn't, who's more combative. All of those scenes, you're going to get it in this movie. Nah. Those were the okay scenes. It is the moments when they're talking to their father, when they're talking to their mother. There is one sequence where he talks to his sister about having lived in the same room and being raised there, but never really seeing each other. Nah, it's all those connective moments that really make this movie. And I think it's that the improvisational approach to it that really helped it. I really like the movie. I'm not going to say it's the biggest standout, but for the moments where it really works, like that dad speech that is given, I think it really hits. It was one of the closest ones to get me to cry. The guy in front of me was doing like the YMCA, trying to pretend like they weren't crying, but they were playing Vogue with it, dude. So I would recommend this one if the premise intrigues you, and I think it's a really good performance from everyone involved, including Elliot.
Nice. Tell me a little bit about A Normal Family.
Have you seen the original to this?
No, what is the original?
The Dinner, with Rebecca Hall, with Richard Gere. It is the same premise, now adapted in a different country, with better actors, better direction, and I think makes the finale hit even harder. I don't want to spoil anything about this movie other than it is 2 families, specifically 2 brothers, whose wives never really get along, but they kind of have to once both of their kids are involved in an incident. This was a last-minute link that they sent us. We arrived back home, and we are late because the person says, you got 24 hours to watch this. I'm like, bro! We put that bad boy on, and I was remembering the original as I was watching it. I'm blinking where this comes from. South Korea.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit better than Concrete Utopia, but Concrete Utopia definitely has more of the nationalist themes that it's going for in terms of how people live in that area, but this is a really good dramatic thriller. So nice. I'd put this one on the radar.
Cool. Let's talk a little bit about Les Indésirables. Amanda tried to help me, and I'm just so
Amanda
bad
tried to
at
help us.
Pronunciation.
I told her we're going to in and out her audio, and then I'm going to just play that in the soundboard. This is the story about, again, another condo, if we're talking like Concrete Utopia, where all of these people live and are put in a very decrepit place in France, and a new mayor has just been not elected, just taken the role after the previous mayor passed during another demolition. So now you have this place that he kind of wants to break down because it's not beneficial to him. A mayor who doesn't even know the people who live in his town. He's got his own agenda going on, but you're splitting it between him and the people who live in this building. A bunch of actors who were previously in Les Miserables, but new actors who have only done television and kind of lead the role. And, I like that I stand with my 4 stars. I'm definitely not giving it anything more. I wouldn't take away from it, but I do wish it went a little bit deeper in what it was trying to cover. It's one of those movies that wants to motivate you into doing something, and it just makes you wonder, why are you passing the baton on to the viewer? Show me something. If you believe your images showcase power to influence other people, then you shouldn't have stopped the movie there, or you should have gone deeper. Look, I'm going to tell you, this movie should have gone full like Aaron Brockovich and following this new candidate who wants to be mayor, or it should have gone full How to Blow Up a Pipeline and just been this anarchist film. It falls somewhere in the center, so you are kind of dissecting both sides, but you don't really get this push that I think he wants to end it with. But I would still recommend it for its performances. There's this really good visual motif of the movie beginning with a casket leaving. They already knew that the elevators didn't work, Zach, so that's why it feels a lot more lived in, because he was raised in this type of apartment.
Yeah.
It begins with them carrying out the dead from this apartment to eventually them being pushed out and carrying out the living in the same apartment. And there's a lot of visual motifs that I think this director is really good at. And, of course, it leaves me wanting more. But I still think it's a good entry into these very kind of similar movies that he's been releasing. Not better than his previous one, but still has me looking forward to his next one.
Yeah, we were fans of Les Miserables. I think Laj is a really interesting filmmaker. Of course, he is a co-writer on Athena, which a lot of people caught on
Very
Netflix. And I think there's certainly like echoes of Athena in this latest one, particularly when you talk about those scenes at the housing block and the chaos of trying to sort of like organize and like disrupt that area. You know, there's a scene where a bunch of people are suddenly moving things out of their apartments, and it like it's both like tragic and horrific and like just hard to peel your eyes away from. He does do this thing where he kind of both sides the issue a little bit in a way that I don't know if it ever feels like justifiably both sidesy, if that makes any sense. But I think he's trying to be fair to everybody, even if they're not necessarily being fair in their roles, if that makes any sense. So
yeah, he's got the cop character from there playing the mayor character here, but you know nothing about him.
Yeah.
It's like he's just supposed to be the evil guy, and it's like, no, you have to, if you're gonna want to play that both, like even if you're gonna go that route, you have to flesh out all the characters for their motivations.
Yeah, I did really like the acting in this one though, so worth checking out.
Oh, you did catch it?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, okay, dope. Oh, so then you know exactly what I'm talking about the way that they filmed it inside the thing for the building. I thought that he was able to get a lot of really good production shots. I don't know if he filmed in an actual location, but
yeah,
he made it look good. His drone shots, of course.
Let's talk about In Flames. What do you think about this one?
I would pitch this as a psychological horror. You have a mother-daughter story going on here where the daughter continues to see these horrific visions of something that she doesn't realize may be something she's repressed. And it takes a while for the mother to recognize what's going on, for her to be able to interact with her. It's also a movie where she chooses to drive, which causes a lot of turmoil that's happening. So you have this kind of psychological trauma that she has while also going through present trauma of an incident that happened because she was caught driving. I think it has some really good performances. Dude, probably some of the best transitions in a movie at this fest. So it's got a lot of really good visual flair, imagery, especially when you start dealing with the psychological aspect of it. And this is one that I think if I give it another rewatch, I'm going to like it even more.
Awesome. I'll talk a little bit about Seven Veils, which is the latest from Adam Egoyan, and it's a pretty interesting film. It's about Amanda Seyfried's character Janine, who is mounting an opera as the director, and it's an opera that she was involved in when she was a child, and as it was directed by her mentor at the time. So she's sort of both putting up her mentor's work and sort of claiming it as her own in making it new. It's all sort of done with the backdrop of an actual opera production that they put up at the Canadian Opera Company. So you have like actual opera singers and full sets. And part of the joy in watching this film is watching the production evolve behind the film, if that makes sense. Like there's the story, and then there's the story underneath that story, and there's ways in which one story sort of echoes the other. It's not a traditional narrative. It doesn't really feel very like beginning, middle and end. It's more a few ideas, a few mood pieces. It's kind of like a little bit experimental in the way it's kind of patchwork, but there's like so many compelling moments and scenes that I was pretty entertained by this one. I don't know if it's like how well it functions just as its own movie, but I found it to be quite compelling, and it's one that maybe on a revisit I would take more out of.
I'm curious because of their previous collaboration.
Yeah, Chloe. All right, I think we got two more left, so let's talk a bit about the Brazilian film Toll, which is a pretty interesting film about a toll booth attendant who starts working with some thieves in order to raise money to send her son to an expensive gay conversion camp. There's kind of a satirical, silly quality to it, but it's done pretty dry. It feels like a drama, even though there's some clear like comedy elements to it. I thought the performances in particular are really good. But what did you think about Toll?
No, I liked it. I think it was a great way to break down the gay conversion camp, specifically by having a woman who thinks that she's doing it for the Lord, for good, not realizing all the other baggage that they have in there. I thought the performances, and more so the characters that they write, especially with her friend, who is also a toll worker, were very interesting. But it's one of those that it breaches out to different genres, which I find fascinating, without it feeling like it's a complete tone shift. Because while you have this like religious drama, right, and then becomes kind of like a crime thriller with the way that she's trying to raise this money to get her son there, with a boyfriend who she has this on and off relationship with. I think the way that the main kid composes himself and moves through wanting to do his own things with his recordings to then dealing with the people at the conversion camp was really funny. And just the sequences in the conversion camp, like you said, are so like they feel like parodies, but it settles into satire because it's so ridiculous. You almost believe that these people would believe this, and sadly they do.
Yeah, it's one of those films that really tries to like highlight the hypocrisy of certain people.
Yeah.
And I think it does that in pretty clever ways. So, yeah, Toll is a really interesting one. Our last one here is one that is going to be available on Hulu in a month and a half.
Yeah.
It is a pretty interesting comedy called Quiz Lady. This one stars Aquafina and Sandra Oh as sisters who go on a game show in order to raise money to help their mother out of a gambling overcome gambling debts. I think the kind of interesting thing about it is that it sort of casts Aquafina in the more like Sandra Oh's type of part, and it casts Sandra in the more Aquafina wild crazy part, and they both do pretty compelling jobs here. I think the film is pretty funny. It's one of those comedies that I have like 1,000 little nitpicks with, but none of them are like any important issues. Because it like has this very goofy quality to it that it shouldn't necessarily be taken too seriously. But I think there's just like something really charming to their relationship, particularly the whole story of Aquafina as this character who is sort of like watched this game show and aspired to be on it, and finally seeing that come to fruition. I don't know. Some of the jokes land, some of the jokes don't land, but it was more entertaining than I at least anticipated it to be at first. Yeah, I don't know. It's a pretty entertaining comedy. And I think people are going to enjoy it when it eventually hits Hulu. You know, there's some other performances here from notable people, including Jason Schwartzman, who kind of plays like a Ken Jennings character. But whoever wrote this movie, I feel like hates Ken Jennings, if that's the case. Will Ferrell, interestingly, plays the host of the show, and this show is sort of like a Jeopardy-esque type of show. So he has both played Alex Trebek on SNL and played like an Alex Trebek stand-in in this movie. Tony Hale is probably one of the funniest elements of it, though, as like a Ben Franklin impersonator. But I don't know. I kind of had a good time at this one.
I heard it was pretty funny, so
Yeah.
I'm curious to catch it.
Nice. All right, and I think that's it for our recap out of TIFF. I mean, there's maybe a couple films that slip through the cracks there, but we'll get to them in the coming months as they come out and are available on a wider audience. But those are most of the films we found most intriguing. We still have our top 10 films of TIFF video coming out. We're recording that in just a bit with Amanda the Jedi, Karsten Runquist, and Jeff from Carscast as well. Jeff Movie. So yeah, lots more TIFF talk to come, and we'll continue with our usual weekend must-watches and stuff. As we talked about earlier, I'm headed to New York Film Festival soon. Art's got the Chicago Fest coming up, so we'll keep catching these festival movies, giving you films to put onto your watch list as the year moves along. We got a question if we saw any Indian movies at TIFF this year. I didn't catch any of them. I know one Tarsim's movie, Dear Jossie, was one that I'm really upset to have not caught, but one that got some pretty interesting reactions out of Midnight Madness was Kill.
I was surprised at that one.
I was curious about that one. And now 3 of my anticipated movies for this year have Kill in them. There's Kill, the Hindi film. There's Killers of the Flower Moon from Scorsese, and there's
the Killer
from David Fincher.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I'd seen the comments. I asked what their favorite was, and then they just disappeared. I feel like many times we get asked, have you seen something from here?
Yeah.
And I don't think they're asking to be like, are you missing one? I think they're asking because they don't know. The one that I had mentioned, the documentary where his family was hand in hand, This Is the World. That was an Indian movie.
Okay, there you go.
Thank You for Coming was another one that I had on my radar, but we didn't get the chance to catch, about a woman who climaxes and then needs to figure out who made her climax. I did catch Lost Ladies, so I did have a couple
Nice.
from there. Lost Ladies is like they swap wives and they don't even realize it. And now they got to re-find their wives because, they were veiled up. But probably the most interesting one, besides Kill, which we were surprised by, Punjab 95, a movie that was a gala presentation and yanked at the last minute. So a couple of Indian movies out there to keep on your radar. But dude, I think we did a pretty good job of hitting every single country.
Yeah, I mean, we hit a lot of countries, a lot of genres, a lot of stars and awards contenders, and hopefully we put some movies on your radar because there are a lot of films that were worthwhile at this year's Toronto International Film Festival. Even if it wasn't my favorite year in Toronto, it was one of my favorite years just to be able to hang out and see people and enjoy the fest. I feel like I'm finally getting a handle on how to navigate Toronto just in time to, leave the Toronto Film Festival. But yeah, we'll be back with more coverage from our Toronto Film Fest movies on this channel this week, and a lot more coming soon. Art, where can people catch more from you?
You can find me over at LME Movies talking about all of the recent releases, explainers, all that good stuff for every week here on the Intercut podcast.
You can catch more from me at Zshevich on whatever social media, or at Multiplex Show on YouTube and TikTok for more videos from me. And make sure you're tuned into Intercut, whether that's on the audio podcast available on most podcatchers, or subscribe to the YouTube channel where you can watch us break down the latest in entertainment. We appreciate it. Leave us those 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. It helps distribute the show to more people. And a reminder that you can sign up to be a patron for the show over on patreon.com/intercutpod for as little as $1 a month. It's a great way to support the show and get your name featured, as I'm doing right now, to our wonderful patrons, including the producers Yuden Veer and Toon, as well as Academy members Tushar, Cademan, Connor, Josh, May, Ricky, Joe, Janicia, Tyler, and Benji. But that's about it for this edition of the Intercut podcast. And until next time, grab a curried lamb wrap from Ravi Soups. Trust me on that one.